Chapter 321, Hopeless Situation Boom. Huge water waves jumped to the sky from under Yunshi's feet. It was a fully automatic countermeasure released by his sailing jellyfish robe. It was one of the ultimate protections Yunshi pre-prepared for himself. Under the White Emperor mask, Yunshi's face was pale and hard. Huahua's sky-flying sword was even stronger than his imagination. Now, he was protected by 3 artifacts: the sailing jellyfish robe, the White Emperor mask and the Water God's crown. From his head to his toes, the Trinitarian defensive measure was perfect. Even so, Huahua's sword still broke his defense easily and cut Yunshi's face through the White Emperor mask. Although Yunshi's face wasn't really being cut by the sword tip but being cut by the winds caused by the sword, however, it still left a horrible wound from his chin to his ear. This is her sword. Condensing 9 ice lotuses in the air, Yunshi stepped on the waves. He touched the wound on his face vigilantly. If he wasn't wearing the 3 artifacts, he would have been killed. Until now, he still didn't know how Huahua's sword could do that. Although he had concentrated his attention on the sword, he even felt that time itself was becoming slower and slower. However, he still couldn't see and understand how Huahua's sword moved. Humph, you lucky bastard. Huahua took a deep breath. Blood-colored air raised from her body to the sky like steam, turning into a pattern of 2 wings, which Yunshi didn't understand at all. Oh, this is the feeling, this is the anger and persistence, this is the sense of freedom. I can break and tear open everything. No one could disobey the will of the sky-flying bloodline. The blood boiled in her body, and her sweat would be evaporated instantly after appearing on her skin. Her heartbeat was 20 times faster than usual. If she was an ordinary person, her heart would have broken into pieces. Her right wrist was painful, and the blood in and around her lungs rushed to the pulmonary alveolus. Pain went through her whole body. It was the result of burning her life using her non-hero ranked body. It doesn't matter, the pain is nothing, my body can adjust to it naturally, and turn my will to a real power, reversing everything in my body. Put off. Put off. Put off. Dispel all side effect. Step forward again. The translucent halos appeared under her feet again. Her will started to erode and reform her body, exceeding the limit of flesh and blood. In her body, the massive blood power turned into one imprinting after another and overlapped together. Her bones, flesh and blood groaned, because her body constitution wasn't strong enough to suffer the reformation of her power and started to crash. An unknown thing which was sealed in her body had been released and input a great amount of bioactive factors into her blood. The temperature in her body was beyond the limit that ordinary people could suffer. She felt like she could ignite a sea with her blood. Her sky-flying bloodline was releasing a surprising amount of heat like an erupting volcano. Ahia! Her sword dropped from the sky. The ice lotuses, which could still block the sword just now, all smashed under this attack, turning into countless silver ice particles flying in the air. Take this, and feel fear. This is my sky-flying sword, the godlike sword skill only I can use. The pain on her body was getting worse. The surprising heat was pushing its way into her body like crazy. She had never entered this realm. If she was an ordinary person, she would have died due to spontaneous combustion from this heat. She had broken through the tipping point. Crimson air raised from her body. At this moment, Huahua was even stronger than the master of this world, the White Emperor. Although Yunshi's weapons were better, but in the face of Huahua's sky-flying sword, his will and spirit were all being suppressed. To Yunshi, it was just a matter of time before defeat. The 9 ribbons spread in the air. Yunshi clenched his fists tightly. Is this Huahua's real power after she gets serious? She was just one person, but she could even surpass the White Emperor who had the help from an entire world. Fight against a whole world, she did it. Exceeding the will of a world, she did it. What can't she do? What can I do to reach the same level she's at? It's simple, you will find the answer after releasing your real power too. Standing outside the life energy shields, Cassina smiled. Only a godlike skill can fight another godlike skill. Remember the treasure I engraved in your body and soul. It's your reward for saving this world. Gee! Suddenly, Yunshi noticed that his body made a position against his will. It doesn't make any sense. Before his mind realized it, When facing the coming sky-flying sword, Yunxi's body independently made the reaction. His left hand raised to the sky and his right hand dropped to the ground. One hand stood for the heaven and the other hand stood for the earth. His body became a bridge connecting the sky and the ground. Yunxi felt as if his body was out of his will's control. It had become a part of this world and resonated with the rhythm of the entire world. In the face of Ouroboros' sword, the most valuable treasure Cassina left in his body was activated. Synchronization is completed. His body had been synchronized with this world. This was the water god's world, the world the White Emperor saved. Infinite energy gushed towards Yunxi from all directions, from the sky and earth, gathering together under Yunxi's feet automatically. Only a godlike skill can fight another godlike skill. What's the godlike skill Yunxi knew? There was only one answer. The battle god genre, the magnificence of sky dance. Chapter 322. The godlike skill. Yunxi's left hand rose up to the sky and his right hand pointed at the ground. His body turned into the bridge connecting the sky and the earth, transferring the world's power into his own body. Just like what he felt when Cassina possessed his body, his mind entered the all-seeing state again. The rules of the world turned into data flow, streaming into his hands. This was the only godlike skill Yunxi had ever used, and his only method to fight against his invincible childhood sweetheart, Ouroboros. Without the help of Cassina's will, his speed was slightly slower than before, but the energy that was gathering into his hands was more than the last time. A large proportion of the energies were sheer longness energy that hadn't been used to repair this world by the sailing jellyfishes. Only godlike martial artists could borrow the free energy between the sky and ground easily. Even throughout the endless gods' domains, the number of godlike martial artists could still be counted on fingers. Cassina was one of them. Because Yunxi's body still remembered the battle god genre martial arts, and he could use the energy in the entire water god's world freely, thus he could replicate Cassina's martial arts. Oh, I see it. The time didn't disappear, but... After entering this special state, Yunxi finally found the secret of Ouroboros' sky-flying sword. It was a way of exerting force that theoretically couldn't be done by a human body. When she brandished her sword, her bloodline power was also burning into full play. When ordinary people brandished their swords, it would take them 3 steps: accumulate strength, brandish the sword, and draw back the sword. However, because of her burning blood power, Ouroboros didn't need to accumulate strength and draw back her sword. Therefore, Yunxi could only see her sword's furious attacks without stopping. That was the secret of the sky-flying sword, the godlike sword skill that was beyond mortals' imagination. In this state, Ouroboros' skin was pink and white and as smooth as silk. It was the bonus of releasing her sky-flying bloodline, which had just adjusted her body to the most perfect state, which also meant the most beautiful state. With the great amount of energy, Yunxi pressed down his left hand and raised up his right hand. At that moment, the rules of the world were reversed. The rules of Yunxi must accumulate strength before he attacks, and Yunxi must adjust his body position first before launching the second attack were cancelled. Using the magnificence of skydance, Yunxi did the same thing to Ouroboros. He waved his hand and the relative position of the sky and earth was reversed. At first, her sword was dropping from the clouds toward his head, but now, it became a sword that was flying into the sky. At the same time, Yunxi also flew into the sky and pressed his hands on Ouroboros' chest. The magnificence of skydance, sky style. Build the bridge connecting the sky and earth. Both of his hands tightly pressed on her breasts. Because her body temperature was extremely high at that moment, Yunxi felt a gush of heat was rapidly spreading into his body through his hands. Aga. Ouroboros' mind descended into chaos. Her body instantly twisted when she felt the temperature of Yunxi's hands, and the blood power in her body also immediately intensified into a frenzy. Arguably, when Yunxi's hands pressed on her chest, she had been defeated at that moment. At that critical time, her sky-flying bloodline took over the control of her body automatically and forcibly made the burning blood power in her body cool down. Unfortunately, it couldn't change the fact that Ouroboros had been caught by Yunxi's magnificence of skydance, just like what happened to Shea Longness before. For the first time in his life, Yunxi clearly felt the soft hand feel of Ouroboros' chest. His body still followed the running mode of Cassina's martial arts, flying into the sky holding Hua Hua in his arms. Sky style. A huge vortex formed by the free energy in the air appeared and surrounded them. When they flew up to the peak point, the positions of their bodies reversed. Yunshi was on the upper side and Hua Hua was on the underside. Earth style. Again, the rules of the world were reversed. The energy that was soaring into the sky together with them suddenly changed directions, dropping them to the ground. The earth was like a mother that was waiting for her children, opening her arms to Yunshi and Hua Hua. Boom! With countless bright lights caused by the free energy in the air, they dropped from the sky into the sea, which was in the northeast quadrant of the Celian city. Extracting energy. Without hesitation, Yunshi's body naturally absorbed the incredible amount of blood power in Hua Hua's body. Everything was so natural and smooth. The memory about the martial arts Cassina left in his body had all been remembered. Moreover, the rules of this world had been reversed to help in accelerating this process. After a few seconds, Yunshi had extracted all the blood power in Hua Hua's body and released them into the air. However, Yunshi felt that something wasn't right, because compared to the strength Hua Hua showed just now, the amount of blood power was lesser than what he estimated. Through his hands that were pressing on Hua Hua's chest, Yunshi could feel that Hua Hua's heartbeat was very strange. When his hands had just touched her chest, her heartbeat was about 100 times faster than ordinary people. But now, her heart rate was only about 1 beat per minute. Yunshi even believed that her heart and breathing had all stopped. Have I survived through this torment? After observing Hua Hua for a while, Yunshi found that her breath and heartbeat gradually returned to normal. He let out a sigh of relief. Oh, I was almost punished by Hua Hua's sky-flying sword. The next second, Yunshi found that it was way too early to relax. I caught you. Hua Hua opened her eyes and said coldly. Chapter 323, Desperate Fight. I caught you. Hua Hua opened her eyes, ground her teeth and said in a cold tone. Yunshi found that he had made a mistake. The magnificence of Sky Dance did break Hua Hua's sky-flying sword. To be exact, he just took her by surprise by pressing his hands on her chest. However, it didn't mean that he had won. Although Hua Hua's broken sword had been lost in the disarray before, but even though she wasn't holding a sword now, she was still Hua Hua. The danger hasn't been disarmed. You die. Hua Hua's wrapped her legs around Yunshi's waist tightly, blocking all his movements. She wasn't just good at using a sword. Her close combat ability was also superb. As the inheritor of sky-flying bloodline, she didn't have any weakness. Extracting. Yunshi was really freaked out. If he wasn't wearing the sailing jellyfish robe, his waist would have been broken under the strength of her legs. The strength of her legs was much stronger than the Lamia's death coil. So, Hua Hua's close combat ability is also great. No wonder that she is my invincible childhood sweetheart. Boom. Infinite lights exploded into the sky from the deep side of the sea, forming one light curtain after another in the sky. When the people in the Celian city looked at the sea, they could see continuous water columns ejected up to the sky, forming a colorful, fantastic scene in the sky above the sea. How can this be possible? Yunshi realized how strong the power in Hua Hua's body was again. If he wasn't in the water god's world, where the entire world was sharing the pressure with him, he would have been killed. How many secrets are still hiding in your body, Hua Hua? Shuffle. The 9 ribbons on the crown stretched out and tied Hua Hua's arms tightly. This was the most Yunshi could do now. However, this fact proved that it was far from enough. Hua Hua's hands were tied, but her legs were still free. She never conceded and was still struggling. Her legs just slightly loosened when Yunshi started to extract her power again, but soon after, her legs wrapped around his waist again with a stronger strength. If one took a glance at them from a distance, one would have thought that they were just a loving couple that was hugging each other. Only they themselves knew that it was a battle that was betting everything. Extracting. 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 Yunshi sadly found that without the help of Cassina's will, his magnificence of Sky Sword was awfully bad. Cassina could easily extract Shea Longness energy and backfeed it to the entire water god's world, and now he was just facing his childhood sweetheart, but the effect of this godlike skill wasn't good and he was so frantic. No, they are different. Cassina had sat on the cloud and watched their battle for a while. She shook her head. Shea Longness energy was different from Hua Hua's energy. As the strongest slime, Shea Longness energy was from the endless slimes in the endless gods' domains. Although the amount of her energy was incredible, the quality of her energy was bad. The energy in Hua Hua's body was different. From the beginning, she was using her own energy. Hua Hua's energy was like a piece of iron, and Shea Longness energy was like a cloud. Obviously, it was easier to absorb a cloud than to absorb a piece of iron, even though the former was much larger than the latter. Yunshi's control of his magnificence of skydance wasn't as bad as he thought, it was just because Hua Hua's body constitution was too special. To a person at his rank, it wasn't a wise choice to absorb energy from her since she was an owner of the rigid body. Boom. 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 Yunshi extracted Hua Hua's energies and then immediately released them to the sky, then repeated this process over and over again. The energies turned into lights flying in the sky like beautiful fireworks and formed a few rainbows in the sky. The ring of blessing echoed above the sky of the Celian city again, as if it was for celebrating something. For 3 days and 3 nights, Yunshi and Hua Hua were still hugging together, continuing their dangerous seesaw battle in the sea. Fortunately, the balance of victory gradually biased toward Yunshi, because this was the water god's world, the entire world was helping here. At the last moment of the 3rd day, Yunshi's ribbons took over the control of Hua Hua's left hand. On the 4th day, the ribbons took over the control of her right hand. On the 5th day, the ribbons tied around her neck. On the 6th day, her upper body was tied by the ribbons. Finally, on the 7th day, the 9 ribbons tied her legs. So far, Hua Hua's whole body was bound and sealed. During the process, Yunshi gathered and released over 100 rounds of energy bursts. Yunshi turned his body into the bridge between the sky and earth, extracting her energy and releasing them to the air over and over again. People could even see the lights transformed from the energies from the Celian city, and they called this scene Rainbow Fountain. I won't let you go. After struggling for 7 days and 7 nights, Hua Hua still didn't concede. She still stared at Yunshi's silver mask with a determined look. Why don't you concede, Hua Hua? Yunshi felt that he had reached the limit of his body and soul. If the entire world wasn't still supporting him, he would have fainted. Originally, he was the one who had the upper hand, but now, he was afraid that he would topple down first. After having her energy being extracted for over 100 rounds, Hua Hua was still spirited. What a monster she is. Chapter 324, The Water God's Blessing. Ride a tiger and find it hard to get off. This was the most suitable proverb to describe Yunshi's dilemma at this moment. Moreover, it wasn't a common tiger but a winged tiger that could slaughter thousands of green hippos easily. After having her energy extracted for over 100 rounds, Hua Hua was still spirited. What's wrong with her body? If it was Yunshi and he wasn't in the water god's world, he didn't think he had any resistance in the face of the magnificence of Skydance. He was the one that was extracting Hua Hua's energy, but now, he was afraid that he would faint before she conceded. The perspiration poured down his white emperor mask, the recovered wounds had started to become painful again. Ha, 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 Yunshi gasped for air. Without sleep and rest for 7 days and 7 nights, Yunshi was already exhausted, even the ribbons that were tying Hua Hua were slightly loosened. Cough, ha ha, you can't hold on much longer. Hua Hua's face looked both funny and annoyed. She wanted to laugh, but she was still tied. In some sense, he hadn't conceded, but she did face the first failure of her life. She was still energetic, but it wasn't because she had a strong will or beliefs, it was simply because of her powerful bloodline. Sky-flying bloodline wouldn't be bound by any forces. It was a godlike bloodline that was doomed to fly in the sky. At the moment Hua Hua was caught by Yunshi, the battle had left the right path and became this helpless situation. Oh, Yunshi could only smile bitterly. He didn't suspect that Hua Hua's bloodline was far stronger than his imagination. If Cassina's will was still possessing his body and he had his 1 million brides power, it was possible for him to win. Unfortunately, reality proved that even with the help of the will of the entire water god's world, he could only barely suppress his childhood sweetheart for a few days. When Yun-shi despondently estimated how long he could still hold on and try to extract Huahua's energy again, a great will descended upon his body. It was a strong, prideful, confident, soft and hot will. In the sky, Cassina let out a sigh of relief. She kicked her feet freely in the air and looked at the two people in the sea with a smile. The battle was over. Yun-shi's mind became blanked. Without the support of the stars, his mind couldn't withstand such a great will now. Of course, the will wouldn't hurt him, because it was from the source of this world, the water god, Hydra. Originally, Huahua was about to break away from the ribbons. When the will appeared, she was bound tightly again. Hydra's strength spread through Yun-shi's whole body. Each of the 9 ribbons was filled with an absolute strength that could suppress Huahua completely. What? Huahua felt the terrible aura, which only existed in the White Emperor mask and covered Yun-shi's whole body now. It's about time I have a talk with you, sky-flying princess. Looking down at her, Hydra exposed Huahua's real identity. You are the White Emperor. You are the person who possessed my little she's body. She immediately understood who was talking to her. Yes, it's me. Hydra took the blame for Yun-shi without hesitation. Since she was the one who let him become her apostle and granted him the White Emperor mask, she would take responsibility for everything he did in this world. Yun-shi saved this world from being destroyed by Shea Longness. Of course she would give him her blessing. The entire world and the beings in this world were her betrothal gifts to him. She witnessed his growth and his love for this world, which meant that he loved her, because she was this world. Her body turned into the ground. Her blood turned into the sea. Her soul turned into the sky. Even her nightmare turned into the mist tide and the mist demon tree, becoming a necessary part of this world. She is this world. Return my Yun-shi to me. Huahua cried. Only Yun-shi was her treasure and she won't let anyone take him away. She was the first on everything. She was Yun-shi's first childhood sweetheart, she was his first love, she would undoubtedly become his bride and have a happy life with him. The times that only belonged to the two of them were always full of happiness. She would feel satisfied as long as she could stay together with Yun-shi. If this still couldn't be called love, it must be the fault of the entire world. He loves you too. What an admirable couple. However, you should know he won't live in the Garden of Peace forever. Just like you, he is doomed to step on the stage of the endless god's domains. You should know what a great potential he has. You can't monopolize him forever. Even so, you still love him and wanted to protect him? Hydra wore a faint smile on her face, waiting for Huahua's answer. Huahua cried out without hesitating for a second, Yun-shi is forever my little she. No matter what mistakes he had made, no one can keep us apart. Naught can stop my love for him, even if it's you, a god. If Yun-shi decides to be the enemy of the entire world, I will help him challenge the entire world. No matter what he will be, he is forever my treasure, and I will never let anyone take him away. Hydra smiled. She took off the silver mask from Yun-shi's face. Yun-shi's body and appearance returned to normal. It wasn't his middle-aged man appearance that was disguised by the mask, but his real appearance, the callow 16-year-old boy. Take the blame for my bride, deceiving the innocent girls for my lover. What a sinful lady I am. However, it's not bad, is it? My cute bride, I'm waiting for your growing up. As a good lady, I will help you become stronger. This is a blessing from me, the water god, Hydra. Chapter 325, Dream or Reality. Yun-shi had a dream. It was a strange and ridiculous dream, even in his wildest delusion. In the dream, he became the savior of a world called the Water God's Fantasy Island. In order to save the world, his partner named Yun-kyu helped him make the expansion plan of 1,000,000 brides. After successfully proposing to over 1,000,000 girls, he obtained the Mist Soul Army's power and had a fierce battle with a super-strong enemy, Shea Longness, the Sky Sword. The Guardian of the Door, the oldest Sky Sword, watched the battle and held the final judgment. The strongest battle god, Cassina, possessed his body and beat down Shea Longness using his hands. The master of the water god's world, Hydra regarded him as her bride and granted him the highest power of administration in this world. Finally, Huahua found him with jealousy and had a fierce battle with him. He was forced into the corner by her and had to use the only godlike skill he knew, the magnificence of skydance, which let him successfully defeat his childhood sweetheart. What a real dream! Huahua's breasts were soft and rubbery, the handfeel was too comfortable. Not only so, Yunshi could also clearly remember the process using the 9 ribbons tying her whole body bit by bit. The 9 ribbons were like a part of his body. When they touched Huahua's skin, he also felt a chill of excitement. Well, isn't this dream becoming strange? Huahua wasn't a girl who would bear such a thing. In her character, she should struggle with rage. He knew she was jealous and moody, but she was also his childhood sweetheart, the most perfect lover in his heart. How could she do nothing? Little she, wake up. Vaguely, Yunshi heard her worried voice beside his ears. For the first time, he heard that her voice was trembling. Don't worry, I'm fine. I just had a very long, realistic, and strange dream. Ohu, it's not a dream. My cute bride, I helped you deceive your childhood sweetheart, but you still need to be careful and don't let her notice the truth. I need to continue my sleep now. The next time I wake up, you should have grown up. I will marry you at that time. Before that, you can play with your little darlings here to kill time. Good night, my favorite bride. A lazy sound echoed beside his ears, telling him what the reality was. Can this sound be? He tried to open his eyes, but found his forelimbs feeble. Being exhausted after battling with Huahua for 7 days and 7 nights, his energy hadn't recovered yet. Just like an ordinary person who just ran 10 kilometers without a break, and then the person stopped and tried to relax, the extreme fatigue of the heart could even kill the person. Yunshi. Finding that his body state was becoming bad, Huahua called his name anxiously. If the White Emperor still possessed his body, she wouldn't mind what would happen to him. But now, she had taken back the control of his body. What can I do now? Well now, how about you kiss him? She did not know since when Cassina had quietly stood beside them. Looking at Yunshi's appearance, she had made a very dubious suggestion. Oh, right, artificial resuscitation. Like a drowning man would clutch at a straw, hearing Cassina's suggestion, Huahua immediately pressed her hands on Yunshi's chest and kissed him. Whoa, again. Closing his eyes, he felt a small, sweet tongue block his mouth. His nose whiffed a faint scent, which was like the strongest aphrodisiac. It was stimulating all parts of his body. With the knowledge he learned in the water god's world, his body naturally responded to it. He subconsciously sucked, licked, and lightly bit her tongue. He could feel that her body suddenly trembled just like she was stung. Her natural reaction was so valuable and sensible, making him lost in the pleasant sensation of kissing. The taste in his mouth was becoming thick, and the atmosphere in the air was becoming sweet. Being stimulated by his tongue, her body trembled like a frightened little rabbit. Even though she was the undefeated Huahua, she was no different than other common girls. Her mind had almost blanked out under the kiss. Only Yunshi in this world could break her defense that easily, by invading her mouth. At first, it was just a mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. However, his skillful kissing soon made her lay down her arms and surrender. When her mouth slightly opened and her tongue was entangled by Yunshi's tongue, she was already doomed to be defeated. He greedily explored her tongue with his tongue and drank her saliva. During the process, his energy gradually recovered. When the deep kiss finished, she blushed and didn't dare look at his face. Her shamefully cute face was a treasure of his own. Sorry, Huahua. I think I had a very bad dream. Am I still dreaming? It was true. He could barely recognize the difference between his dream and the reality. The things that happened in the water god's world were too extraordinary, but they were real. Therefore, this Huahua, whose face blushed, should be true one. Shouldn't she? Little she, your nightmare is over. Everything will get better. Of course, she wouldn't confuse him with the White Emperor. After the mask disappeared, her little she returned. This shy, uneasy, but also warm boy was her childhood sweetheart, her lover. As for the White Emperor, he could go to hell and never let me see him again. My little she won't be salacious like him. My sky-flying bloodline won't surrender to anyone, even though the mask's real identity is the god of this world. Chapter 326, Two White Emperors. 1. Yes, it was just a dream. Ouroboros hoped that she didn't get affected by the crimes of the shameless White Emperor. The man who married 1,000,000 brides had no relationship with her little she. Ouroboros, looking at his childhood sweetheart, she felt as if a generation had passed. It seemed that everything returned to normal. The things that happened in the water god's world were like a dream and a bubble's shadow. Only holding Ouroboros tightly was the only real touch he could feel right now. In the sky, a figure wearing the White Emperor mask and the sailing jellyfish robe was comfortably laying on a group of sailing jellyfish, regarding them as a soft, warm bed. Sitting down opposite her was Cassina, the sixth sky sword, who looked very familiar with her figure. "Will you really let him go? Isn't this little guy your favorite bride?" Cassina asked and looked at Hydra curiously. "If he wants to stay in this world, this paradise I made for him, I will protect him forever, letting him enjoy a happy life. However, he wants to leave, he wants to see the various gods' domains and reach a higher realm. Since my bride wants to, I can't just go to sleep and do nothing. So I decided to give him one last help. I believe he will become a much more beautiful bride in the future." Hydra blushed as she smelled Yunshi's odor left on the mask and the robe. "He is still too young now, it's a bit awkward to put my hands on such a young boy. Can this still be considered a lady's behavior? Aren't you playing a growing game? What bad taste." Cassina sniffed at Hydra. "He will come back, because there is a very important thing for him here. Unfortunately, he still can't obtain it yet." Hydra showed a mysterious smile on the corners of her mouth. "As for you, Cassina, don't carry off my bride. I don't think I like robbing the cradle like you. I just want him to become my disciple. After all, it's not easy to find such an excellent soft body," Cassina said in a bad tone and kicked Hydra's leg. Her brown skin was in striking contrast to Hydra's white skin. "You are like a pot calling the kettle black. Don't forget you are already hundreds of years old. You are not the little girl who accidentally broke into my garden." As a lady, Hydra thought that it was too impolite to talk about the age problems. The difference between a 5-digit number and a 3-digit number was just 2 zeros. It's not too striking a difference. It's not my fault for being a long-lived fantasy creature. I'm not as shameless as you. How old are you? How can your mind still be filled with fantasies about love? To Cassina, improving her martial arts was the ultimate goal of her life. Nothing was more important than that. During her hundreds of years of life, she only had the impulse to accept disciples a few times, because there weren't too many super geniuses in the gods' domains that could let her feel interested enough and want to teach them the battle god genre. In some sense, Cassina was a pure woman, just like the sword the sands of time on her back. Yes, you still haven't changed, just like the little girl below." Hydra shrugged her shoulders. If Cassina's character wasn't like this, she probably couldn't create the strong battle god genre. Cassina only used a few hundreds of years to enter the legend rank. Even though all sky swords were monsters above monsters, Cassina was still one of the most terrible monsters amongst them. Also, due to her pure, innocent character, she could become a lot of old beings' friends, because no one would worry about whether or not she would betray them. She was a person that could help her friends keep any of their most valuable treasures. Compared to Cassina, the sky-flying princess was also skilled and had a potential that wasn't inferior to any sky sword. However, her intelligence was too unreliable. There was so much evidence that had proved that she was the White Emperor, yet she still trusted him wholeheartedly. She blamed all the things she had done on the White Emperor. Looking at such a pure and cute little princess, Hydra couldn't help but want to play tricks on her. As a lady who took the blame for her bride, Hydra showed an evil smile on her face. "My bride, there are still a lot of surprises waiting for you in this world. Therefore, grow up quickly, you are still not strong enough to know the secret of this world." As the watcher of this secret, she had slept and waited for thousands of years. It won't be a long time to continue waiting for 100 years again, will it? I'm looking forward to your growing up. I'm looking forward the moment you wear the gorgeous wedding dress. My most favorite, beautiful and loveliest bride, Yunshi. Well, Yunshi felt his back go cold. It must be my delusion, he thought. You mean, the White Emperor has left? Yunshi found something wrong. I am the White Emperor, where did the other White Emperor come from? Moreover, the White Emperor said that everything I did in this world was actually what he did. Now, the master of this world had appeared, so he didn't need my body anymore and returned it to Ouroboros. The other White Emperor helped Yunshi to deceive Ouroboros, but for what reason? That White Emperor is just a bastard. He just thought that your body is a good container and used you like a puppet. Ouroboros was outraged with anger. The damn White Emperor is guilty. He deserves 10,000s of death. Chapter 327, Two White Emperors, 2, Splosh. Splosh. Sea waves gently washed upon the sandy beach. When the sun went down, beside a campfire, Yunshi was laying in Ouroboros' arms with a helpless look. Oh, how dare the White Emperor control my little she's body. If he didn't help you enhance your body as a compensation, I wouldn't be done with him. Ouroboros pinched Yunshi's hands and feet with a disgruntled look. This was already the 10th time she helped him check his body. Her expression was always bad every time she checked his body. He didn't know whether it was good or bad. Without the White Emperor mask, Yunshi couldn't obtain the help of this world's help again. However, the changes that had happened to his body didn't disappear. Even he himself hadn't realized that his body had been totally changed unknowingly. If his physical quality when he just arrived in the water god's world was 1, he was 100 times stronger than his past self. He could now kill 100 units of his past self easily, even with his eyes closed. Due to the breakthrough of his baker's career, his mental strength had also been strengthened, which was already far more than most hero-ranked beings. Although the career baker couldn't enhance his combat ability, it could help him increase his speed of understanding of the rules of the universe. Only the barrier between the mortal rank and the hero rank was still stopping Yunshi from becoming stronger, although it wasn't really a hurdle for him since he had even experienced the power of the legend rank with his body. If he wanted, he could stride across the barrier within 3 days, becoming a hero-ranked swordsman. However, after experiencing the powers of the legend rank, Yunshi looked back on his path to power again and ceased to advance consciously. He gave up trying to reach the hero rank for the time being. As a matter of fact, it was also because of the power Ouroboros had shown him, which let him realize what a strong potential the mortal rank still contained. After seeing the tip of the iceberg of the legend rank, he found that all the legend-ranked powers he had ever seen had a similar feature. Hydra, the water god, the fantasy creature Overlord, the 9-headed demon snake, as long as her 9 heads weren't being chopped off at the same time, she was immortal. Shea Longness, the 10th sky sword, the child of the slime race, the slime who had thousands of avatars, as long as there was still a slime living in the endless god's domains, she wouldn't be killed. If the reason they entered the legend rank was because of their specific race, then the other 2 legends were totally different. Cassina, the 6th sky sword, the battle god, the human who had entered the god's realm, the super martial artist who beat Shea Longness to death, and the oldest sky sword, who just appeared for a moment but judged 3 legend-ranked beings in an instant. The 4 legend-ranked beings had all exposed powers that were similar to the essential rules of the world. Shea Longness' power and Hydra's power tended to be race-specific. Cassina's power and the oldest sky sword's power were close to the law of heaven and earth. Maybe they were just different forms of expression of the same power, because they were all powers that sprang from the basic rules of the universe. The common point is, Ouroboros, if I wanted to reach the legend rank, is it a must-be to master a godlike skill? Lying on her knees, he suddenly asked. Gee, why are you asking? Oh, I see, the White Emperor told you this. No, he didn't. To humans, mastering a godlike skill is indeed the best way to open the door of the legend rank, however, it isn't the only way. If you can arouse your oldest bloodline power, Ouroboros suddenly realized that Yunshi's bloodline couldn't be as good as her sky-flying bloodline, so she immediately changed the topic. If you can find a super artifact that is perfectly fit for your physical quality, for example, one of the legendary sky swords, it can help you reach the legend rank. So, godlike skill, bloodline and artifact were the 3 essentials that can help me reach the legend rank. Yunshi silently remembered this information. There were also the things countless people wanted to obtain in the endless god's domains. Arousing his oldest bloodline, mastering a godlike skill, or obtaining an artifact. If he wanted to open the door leading to the legend rank, he must obtain one of the 3 keys, otherwise, it would be just a waste of time no matter how hard he tried. In fact, the 3 keys all pointed to some certain rules of this world. They could be considered as the instantiations of these rules. Hua, Hydra, and Shea Longness were born with one of the keys. When they grew up, they could naturally enter the legend rank. Cassina created a godlike skill using her own power and wisdom, then opened the door using her godlike skill as the key. As for the oldest sky sword, her artifact, the ice blue sword, was impressive to him. He guessed that she may have entered the legend rank by using her sword. After all, the ice blue sword could even beat down the white holy dragon, the water god, and the 10th sky sword. Undoubtedly, it was the strongest artifact he had ever seen. Although it was for just a short time, when he was holding the ice blue sword, he had a vision that he could cut open the entire water god's world at that moment. What a delusion! No, it was probably not a delusion. The ice blue sword really could break stars and cut open the void. This is really a big, big world. Stretching out his hand, Yunshi looked at the clouds through his fingers. In the sky, he vaguely saw a silver-masked figure smiling at him. It was Hydra's avatar, who just wore the silver mask and replaced his identity, walking in this world as his substitute. Now, there were 2 white emperors in this world at the moment. The figure who replaced his identity in this world and helped him carry everything on his back. The young boy who had just returned to his childhood sweetheart and would embark on his journey and new life. They were both the White Emperor. Chapter 328. The innocent fantasy creature Overlords. Don't look at the sky. That guy isn't handsome at all. Hua held Yunshi's hand and pressed it on her cheek. Listen, little she, you can't be affected by that man. He is just a shameless pervert and deserves 10,000 deaths. If he didn't return you back to me, I wouldn't just let him go. Listening to her angry tone, sweat broke out all over his body and trickled down his back. No matter what will happen, I will never tell her that I was the White Emperor and I wasn't being possessed. Fortunately, she didn't even doubt him. Even before he tried to find any excuse, she had poured her anger at the non-existent White Emperor. Was it a white lie? No, it wasn't a lie, because he never said I'm not the White Emperor. Yunshi's body was possessed by the White Emperor was just her guess, and she believed it beyond a shadow of doubt. As a man, he thought that he knew when to speak and when to close his mouth tightly. Looking at his strange expression, she felt that something was wrong. Oh, there's smells on Yunshi's body. Sniff, sniff. She smelt his skin like a little puppy and wanted to cry. The smells are too many. They are not just the smells from 1 or 2 people, but dozens of mixing smells, from his toes to his fingers. She could imagine what an amazing crime the White Emperor had made when he possessed Yunshi's body. Wooa! That damned White Emperor stained my little she. I will be back with a vengeance after my sky-flying bloodline is aroused. White Emperor, I will remember you. The 9th day after the 6th sky sword, Cassina arrived at the water god's world. In the hustle and bustle in the streets, a lot of strangers appeared. After the water god's world had been opened to the outside world for a week, finally, the diplomatic groups of other gods' domains had also arrived in this world. A lot of big shots came, and some of them were not inferior to Cassina. If it wasn't because the water god's world had suffered too many pains before and the people here were busy with rebuilding their homeland, these creatures coming would cause a huge unrest. Yes, these big shots were creatures but not humans. They were fantasy creature overlords just like Hydra. Although they didn't choose to become a god like Hydra, instead, relying on their specific race, they could run amok in the endless gods' domains. Yunshi even witnessed a giant snake, whose body was half the size of the water god's world, slowly crawled into this world from the light bridge. The whole process took it a few hours. The giant snake's body looked like it was wrapped around by countless rings. Every time it moved, Yunshi had a fit of dizziness. When he took a close look, he found that the snake wasn't crawling but floating in the air. Actually, it was moving in another dimension but not really crawling with its belly. Probably this was the reason why it could arrive at White Lotus Sword domain from the remote Western God's domain so quickly. When it saw Hydra's White Emperor avatar, the giant snake looked very happy, and its style of greeting was to swallow the White Emperor avatar in its mouth, which made him feel grateful that he was not the White Emperor who was facing the public. After a while, a bird whose body was surrounded with flames flew into this world. After seeing the White Emperor avatar, it also looked very happy and carelessly burned half of the sky red and terrified hundreds of young sailing jellyfish. Fortunately, sailing jellyfish wouldn't be killed in this manner. After being put into the sea, these broiled sailing jellyfish quickly reactivated and flew back to the sky. Little she, remember, if you see the people who look great and sacred in the future, stay away from them. Most of them have something wrong in their minds and ordinary people should never try to get close to them. Hua pointed at the snake and the Firebird and shook her head. For example, the snake is called Ouroboros. People say that it can fly through the void easily, swimming in the sea of space and time with ease, but in fact, it's just an idiot. It even tried to eat its own tail when it felt hungry, and its ability of time travel is actually the result of its jumbled memories. People said that it can predict the future, but most of the futures it had seen were wrong. Moreover, it often confused the time of its prediction. And the Firebird also has a lot of problems. Also, it's an immortal bird, it will still die once upon a time and completely disappear from this world. It also has a bad memory. If it didn't record its memory into the memory stone frequently, it wouldn't even remember its own name. As for how this immortal bird did die and why it could revive after that, has always been a mystery. Looking at the two prodigious fantasy creatures, a drop of sweat dripped down from his forehead. Oh my God, if Hydra didn't replace my identity using the White Emperor avatar, am I the person who would have to face the two fantasy creatures now? No, I can't do it. The gap between the levels of our lives is too wide. Even if I wear the White Emperor mask, I couldn't stop my body from being as stiff as a stick when facing them. Wait, something is wrong. Are they looking at us? Hua quickly stood forward and pulled Yunxi to her back, staring at the two fantasy creatures courageously. Compared to the sailing jellyfish, the snake and the Firebird were really two well-known fantasy creature overlords. They were at the same level with Hydra. Shouldn't they feel jealous after seeing Hydra becoming a god? Why do they look so pleasant? What is happening? Hydra, is he your bride? He looks yummy. The giant snake, Ouroboros, licked its tongue. I can't remember a lot of things again. Hydra, can you tell me the name I used the last time we met, and what is the promise I had made? Chapter 329, Ouroboros Prediction. Oh, your name was Futaba in your last life and was a loving couple with my little bride. You don't remember it because the memory stone you used to record this is broken. As an excellent lady, Hydra didn't feel shy in deceiving the Firebird, Phoenix, with a serious look. She had prepared to make fun of it. Really? No wonder I have a familiar feeling when I look at him. So, he was my lover in my last life. Yes. I almost remember it. His name is... The Firebird, Phoenix, opened its wings and exclaimed. It felt that it was going to remember something very important. When countless burning feathers flew in the air, another group of sailing jellyfish were grilled and spread a roast squid-like smell in the sky and dropped into the Celian city one by one. The girls in the city quickly collected their bodies and sent them back to the sea. Purr. The sailing jellyfish quickly revived in the sea and left the Celian city with fear. The immortal bird Phoenix was too horrifying. What's his name? Phoenix cried and flew into Ouroboros' arms. Don't worry, let me help you. In front of the great Ouroboros, who can travel through space and time, there is no secret in the entire universe. Ouroboros, who was said to have existed in the past, present and future at the same time and could observe all secrets of the universe, gave Phoenix a smile and its promise. Forever universe, forever disaster, I observe everything, I explain everything, I'm the truth of all things, I'm the traveler of the river of time, Ouroboros. The rings around its body started rotating. Ouroboros, are you serious? Hydra looked at it in surprise. Apparently, Ouroboros was using its source power to search for Yunxi's name in the river of time. Even for Ouroboros itself, it wasn't an easy thing. Compared to the predictions of diviners, the rank of Ouroboros' prediction was obviously much higher. Although its predictions about future weren't precise, because 9/10 of its predictions would prove to be wrong, but the remaining 1/10 was very likely to really happen in the future. Maybe ordinary people would sniff at Ouroboros' 10% accuracy, however, only legend-ranked beings could understand how strong its ability was. The futures it could predict weren't the things such as weather, tide, or the celestial trajectories, which could be calculated using math, but the real future that couldn't be calculated by following any rules. Even though the accuracy of Ouroboros' predictions was only 10%, however, once the prediction came true, the probability would become 100%. If judging from this point, it wasn't just boasting for itself that it could travel through time and space. At the least, when it used its ability of observing the future, probably its mind really traveled to the future and saw something. Even if the things it saw would happen in a far future and have no use for the present. Even in the endless gods' domains, Ouroboros was the only fantasy creature who had this ability, therefore, countless forces throughout countless gods' domains hoped to get a word or two from it. Unfortunately, it only predicted the future when it felt interested in it. If it had a good mood, it would even predict for a mortal. If it lost interest in the things people wanted it to predict, it would play dead or act shamelessly in front of them. Therefore, even though it owed a lot of forces an amazing amount of money, its creditors didn't dare bother it and could only pray that it would be interested in helping them predict their futures someday. At this moment, Ouroboros was in a very good mood and was really interested in this. If its creditors knew that it predicted for a common human kid casually, they would die crying. Countless images of stars flipped through Ouroboros' pupils. They were the past traces of the river of time and the possibilities of Phoenix having a relationship with the human boy in the future. "I see it. I see it," Ouroboros exclaimed. "You and he were a couple of lovers." Hydra mouth opened wide in surprise. "Can it be possible? I just made fun of my friend, Phoenix. Can there really be something between Phoenix and my little bride? I knew it, I knew it. Tell me his name and when did I establish my love relationship with him?" Phoenix looked so excited. "Of course, my instinct can't be wrong. He and I really had a special relationship. You and he were enemies." Well, Hydra was completely confused after hearing about this. How could they be enemies and lovers at the same time? Not really. Phoenix was also dumbfounded. The transition was too sudden. Was it a hatred caused by love? "You and he will be very much in love." Ouroboros' body twisted, the rings started to rotate faster and faster around its body. "You and he will be irreconcilable. You will have a life and death fight. He will rob you of your most important thing, you will obtain the most valuable treasure from him." Hydra lightly coughed, looking at Phoenix whose mind was already in a mess. "Are we lovers or enemies? Can you please speak more clearly?" Phoenix groaned and didn't know how she should treat Yunxi. "You are his daughter, and you will marry him. Your daughter will become your new self and embark on a new journey with him. At the end, you and he will face countless strong enemies. You will open your wings and fly into the sky, dancing above the 33 heavens. Till the stars drop from the sky and a new era starts, you and he will." Speaking this, the rings around Ouroboros' body suddenly lost their brilliance and the traces of stars in its pupils also disappeared. Originally, Ouroboros' body was half of the water god's world long, but now, its body heavily shrank and looked like a dead snake who had been exposed under the hot sun for several days. Chapter 330. On the road again. Hiss, hiss, Ouroboros stuck out its tongue and couldn't even turn over its body. Its instinct was warning it to stop observing. If it said one more word, its life would be in danger. "Ouroboros, what happened?" "No, I can't say, I'm already a dead snake." Ouroboros looked desperate. In order to help Phoenix predict the future, it paid a painful price. Perhaps it couldn't observe the future again within the next 100 years. It had promised to predict the futures for a lot of forces before, but now, it seemed that it had to cancel all the orders. If the forces who had paid it the earnest money before knew it, they would go crazy. Hum, when there are too many debts, the best solution is to forget them all. Ouroboros had stopped worrying about them. After all, it's just 100 years. Which prediction is real? Phoenix still recalled the words Ouroboros said before. Lovers, enemies. Have a sweet relationship, have a life and death battle? Daughter, father? Phoenix knew Ouroboros' predictions often turned out to be wrong, but isn't the prediction this time too dubious? Well, at least we know one thing, that you and my little bride will have a special relationship in the future. Hydra was still teasing Phoenix. As a good lady, she loved to do these kind of things very much. Whoa. I don't understand. I don't understand. What is the real future? It was too difficult for Phoenix to think about such a complicated thing. Sorry, I can't help you. Ouroboros collapsed on the central square of the Celian city and its body was still shrinking. The accident in the prediction had almost killed it. Ho ho, interesting. Under the silver mask, Hydra's White Emperor avatar smiled with anticipation. As a fantasy creature, it had lived far too long a life and there were not too many things in the entire universe that could let her feel interested. It seems that my little bride still has a lot of secret. No. We should leave here quickly. The Firebird looks indecent. It's not a decent bird. Little she, don't look at them. As Yunshi's closest childhood sweetheart, Huahua's instinct let her sense a suspect atmosphere in the air. On her jealousy radar, the point that stood for the Firebird suddenly turned from the harmless white to the dangerous red. Danger, danger. Compared to the red tide caused by the White Emperor, this Firebird was tougher. In some sense, the immortal bird Phoenix was more dangerous than the water god Hydra. Oh. Yunshi agreed. Huahua held his hands and left, disappearing in the crowd of people quickly. In the sky above the Celian city, the ring of blessing echoed again. 305. 306. Almost everyone is here. The tutors of the Sword Palace was counting the numbers of the Sword Palace disciples. After the floating ship White Lotus dropped from the sky and were lost in the water god's world, half of the Sword Palace disciples' minds became unstable and lost the practice of keeping up their sword skills. Those chose to quit and return to the lower-level area of White Lotus sword domain, which was equal to giving up their hopes of becoming stronger. Not everyone could conquer their limits in the trial, even though the thing that happened before was actually of great benefit to them. The thing of they survived from wandering between life and death itself was already a gift, which could help them understand the rule of life and death. As long as they could bear it, they could learn more or less from it. Unfortunately, half of them failed. Even after giving up their self-respect and joining the evil god, Tlahui's Kalpantikutli's camp, they still didn't learn anything and were traumatized. When facing the same challenge, some people would fly to the sky and some people would fall to the ground. It's not a surprising thing. At this moment, the Sword Palace disciples who had given up and planned to return to the mortal world were actually a group of such losers. Their swords had lost their sights. Even though they were still the high-class people in the mortal world and could reach the third rank, they were not able to touch the edge of the hero rank. The tutors of the Sword Palace had expected this. The Sword Palace didn't need losers, since they had lost confidence in themselves, the Sword Palace wouldn't force them. After all, they had proved that they were not fit to keep going on the road of the sword skills, and the trial in the water god's world just exposed their weaknesses early. Compared to them, the remaining disciples who still kept their faith about the sword after seeing the disaster in the water god's world were the real treasures in the eyes of the tutors. Especially when they looked at the Starwing Knights girls, their eyes lightened up with appreciation. After signing the marriage contract with the White Emperor, their bodies and souls had all been purified again, especially Hua Yu and Xiao Cao, whose bodies even once carried the wills of the Sky Swords. This was sufficient to prove that they would have a bright future. However, there was a much stronger and more terrible genius. Hua Hua, the girl who just returned to the White Lotus Sword Palace camp with a bright smile, and her maid. If they didn't witness it with their naked eyes, they wouldn't believe that this 16-year-old girl actually dared to challenge the master of this world, the White Emperor. Compared to her, the tutors thought that they had lived their lives in vain. Hua Hua, the most dazzling star in the final battle of the water god's world, the girl who dared to challenge an entire world alone. While holding a broken sword in her hand, she eventually ended the battle in a draw with the White Emperor. She was undoubtedly the best disciple amongst these disciples, and wasn't even inferior to the twin witches, who were doomed to master White Lotus sword domain in the future. Okay, no one is left. Let's set out. Chapter 331. The Firebird who is chasing after them. Ouroboros faintly laid down beside Hydra, looking at the Sword Palace team together with Phoenix. You just let your little bride be kidnapped by Cassina. It's not like you, Hydra. What's our relationship actually? Daughter? Lover? Enemy? What should I call him? Darling? Bastard? Phoenix blushed. She was still in a mess. As a good lady, I won't constrain my bride to stay with me. As long as it's necessary, I can see him at any time. Hydra's White Emperor avatar showed a mysterious smile. Behind her back, the 3 high priestesses were kneeling on the ground gingerly, and reluctantly looked at the Sword Palace team sailing away. They could feel that a part of themselves were leaving this world together with a person. Whoa! Can anyone tell me who he is? Why do I have such a strange feeling? No, I can't wait. I must know the answer now. Phoenix opened her wings, chased after the Sword Palace team and flew away from this world. Oh, our little Phoenix will be badly battered by love. Ouroboros didn't need to predict, and it had known that Phoenix would have a disastrous journey. Not really. Phoenix's lucky point is always high, as long as she doesn't get involved with that person later. Hydra smiled. The thing is becoming interesting. Oh, a problem is chasing after us. Laying on her throne, Cassina felt a headache looking at Phoenix, who was flying after the Sword Palace team but didn't dare to get close. Being chased by such a legendary fantasy creature, the tutors of the Sword Palace were almost scared out of their pants. Even though the immortal bird meant no harm, but how can anyone see a prodigious bird with burning feathers flying around them and feel at ease? If it wasn't because there was a sky sword in the team, they would be utterly routed. Phoenix, what are you doing? Cassina looked at Phoenix in confusion. The Firebird flew around them but didn't get close. What the hell was she doing? I want to know his name. Phoenix stumbled. Yun Shi. Remember, his name is Yun Shi. With a faint smile on her face, Cassina looked at a black-haired maid who had been forced by his childhood sweetheart to wear the maid uniform again. Oh, I didn't notice that my disciple has such a great talent. No wonder that he has such a great soft body. It's a talent that can't be learned through practice. As the sixth sky soared, she almost didn't recognize that the black-haired maid was actually the White Emperor in the Water God's world when she first saw Yun Shi's new appearance. Did Hydra find this a long time ago? Yun Shi. Yun Shi. Yun Shi. Phoenix repeated this name several times, then flew into the sky, leaving the Sword Palace team. Only Cassina could see that Phoenix didn't fly away but just rolled in the higher sky with excitement. Oh, she behaved like a girl in a burning love. Cassina thought. Like all the stars that twinkled around the bright moon, the Sword Palace team, the Starwing Knights girls were all surrounding one person. Being forced by his childhood sweetheart, Yun Shi had to become the black-haired maid Mai again. Mai, are you all right? Mai, it's so nice to see you again. Mai, did you also sign that contract? Yun Shi looked at them with embarrassment. He had to be silent, because he couldn't tell them that he was the White Emperor who married them all. Naturally, his silence was interpreted as a sign of acquiescing. It was really a strange feeling. When I agreed to the White Emperor's proposal, I felt that it wasn't our first meeting. Oh, the White Emperor's bread tasted good. It was very similar to Mai's bread. Yes, I was captured by his bread, so I agreed to marry him. Unfortunately, we won't be able to eat his bread again. Thinking again, the White Emperor is actually a gentleman. He signed the contract with us for saving his world but didn't do anything rude. Remembering their experience in the Water God's world, the girls chatted. Most of them were seduced by Yun Shi's hero-ranked bread, so they were reluctant to part with his bread. Only one person was different. She not only had tasted Yun Shi's bread, but also decided to stay in the Water God's world, living there as the White Emperor's wife. However, she eventually decided to return to the Sword Palace, coming back with the other Starwing Knights girls. At this moment, she gazed at Mai with a very strange look. Seeing her eyes, Yun Shi suddenly had an ominous presentiment. Lulu was the only girl who had skin-on-skin experience with him in the Water God's world. From the first village to the Celian city, they had become so familiar with each other that they could discern each other's smell with their eyes shut. Only in front of her, Yoon-shi was shy to say that he was still an upright gentleman. Chapter 332, Beneath the Moonlight. Welcome back. With mixing feelings in her heart, the shy little rabbit, Lulu, stood forward bravely and hugged Yoon-shi proactively. Talk. Hua's body suddenly shivered while talking with the twin witches. She took a glance at the Starwing Knights girls and saw a rabbit-ear girl was hugging her little she. No, it must be my delusion. My little she's disguise is perfect. It isn't possible even for a legend-ranked being to see through his disguise. She hasn't even reached the hero rank, how can she be a threat? How can anyone expect that I dressed up my lover as a maid? Nothing is safer than this, my decision. No problem, my little she is an upright gentleman, how can he be tempted by such a little rabbit? He isn't that shameless white emperor, who didn't refuse the girls from all races. Bang! Yoon-shi could clearly feel that Lulu's heart was pounding heavily. Her fingers lightly slid across his black hair and stealthily pressed on his back, as if she was confirming the figure of his body. No, she can't recognize me. After all, my body now is different than when I was the White Emperor. She can't recognize me using this method. Yoon-shi sweated profusely for fear of being exposed in the next moment. Fortunately, Lulu hesitated for a while and finally gave up. Can I eat your yummy bread again? Lulu asked tentatively and looked at the black-haired maid in front of her, trying to find the truth through his eyes. Well, of course. Yoon-shi let out a sigh of relief and made a decision in his heart that he would never make the special golden bread for these girls again. His identity would be immediately exposed if they tasted his hero-ranked bread. Fortunately, he had only made them in the water god's world. As long as he didn't make them in the outside world again, he wouldn't expose himself. If he just made common bread, it shouldn't cause any problem. After all, it's a natural thing to be good at cooking as a maid. It just looked like Lulu doubted him, but wasn't sure about it. If possible, Yoon-shi hoped that she would forget everything that had happened in the water god's world. He felt embarrassed about the things he had done before. If he knew that it wasn't just a dream, he would have never made those mistakes. Fortunately, he still could make a fresh start. He decided to be an upright gentleman. Just treat the things in the water god's world as my dream. At any rate, it was a too ridiculous experience. Well, that's all. Even though I have done this thing and that thing with Lulu, the 3 high priestesses, No, I shouldn't keep thinking. Forget them. From now on, I will begin my life anew. I will study hard, then escape again and get free to explore the vast god's domains. I should never forget that the threat from my 4 ex-girlfriends still exists. If they catch me, everything will be over. He wasn't really going to abandon his 1 million brides in the water god's world, he just knew that he couldn't undertake this responsibility now. If it wasn't because his 4 ex-girlfriends were still hunting him or Hua suddenly appeared, perhaps he would have really stayed in the water god's world as the White Emperor. Even though he had saved an entire world and married 1 million brides, Yoon-shi was just a boy who was being troubled in matters of love. Walking along the road the stars made for him, he still needed to practice and study harder. Life is full of sufferings. Yoon-shi wiped off the sweat from his forehead, then suddenly heard a voice echoing beside his ears. Little guy, come to my room this night. Who? Yoon-shi looked around alertly, then surprisingly found that the voice was from the person on the throne. The 6th sky sword, the battle god, Cassina. Apparently, she wasn't being deceived by his disguise and clearly knew his real identity. Oh, no, I'm done for. If she exposes my identity, what will my life become? In the night, Yoon-shi stealthily walked out of his room and looked for Cassina's room. At present, the Sword Palace team was on a floating ship which was far bigger and faster than the floating ship White Lotus. Its name was the Sands of Time. From the name, Yoon-shi knew that it must be Cassina's ship. Don't look around, I'm on the top of this ship, and don't afraid that anyone will see you, I have closed this area. Come here and drink with me, little guy. A lazy voice appeared. Yoon-shi looked up and saw Cassina laying on a bed made of transparent jellyfish. She was only wearing a dancer dress and looked at him with a spurious smile. Okay, well, why me? Yoon-shi walked to her nervously. He wasn't the White Emperor at this moment and wasn't wearing the 3 artifacts. He was lacking in self-confidence when facing Cassina. Because it's you, so I choose you. Cassina drank a blood-colored wine and looked at Yunshi with her hazy eyes. Do you remember the words I said before? You have a great talent, you should be my disciple, but I refused. Yunshi pretended to be innocent. He couldn't be the battle god's disciple, no matter whether he was in the identity of the White Emperor or Yunshi. Ha ha, Cassina laughed. You can't refuse me. Don't you know even Hydra doesn't dare to refuse me? Ah. Yunshi was dumbfounded. When you used my magnificence of sky dance, you were doomed to be my disciple. No matter whether you are Yunshi or Mai, and I don't mind whether you are a boy or a girl. I want you to be my disciple, this is what I want, nothing more. Chapter 333. The practice of the battle god genre. She was persistent and even much more persistent than Hydra. Yunshi realized that Cassina wouldn't change the decision she had made, no matter what his decision was. His refusal meant nothing to this battle god. But I had never learned any martial arts. The reason why I could use the magnificence of skydance before was because your will possessed my body at that time. Yunshi was still struggling, trying to change his doomed fate. Everything happens for a reason. No matter whether it is your martial arts or talent, some things are doomed in this universe. What we humans can do is to find the rules of the universe and control those rules. Cassina shook her head. It wasn't just an accident. When she explored deep inside the highest realms of the legend rank, she found a rule that all accidents were just the results of the endless necessities. It was rare that a human could obtain the soft body. Moreover, this owner of the soft body could reproduce her magnificence of sky sword with his body memory. How could he lack any talent in martial art? The fact was that Yunshi had a great talent for martial arts, which was so great that it was far beyond his own imagination. The magnificence of sky dance wasn't a common martial arts that could be learned by anyone. Although he had the help of the will of the water god's world at that time, but the fact that he could reproduce this skill again had proved that he had a godlike understanding about martial arts. In other words, although he refused to admit it, his body had told her the right answer honestly. How can any martial artist let go of such a good disciple? Pa. Before Yunshi realized it, Cassina had patted dozens of times on his body. All her pats contained a gush of heat flow. These heat flows permeated into his body and went deep into his muscles and nerves, finally forming a special circulating system. Whoa! Why is my body moving uncontrollably? Yunshi's hands stretched out and pressed down on the ground. His body bent at a 90-degree angle and his legs did the split naturally. Quickly, his body made a position like a duck sitting by the road. Remember this position, it's the first step to start practicing your soft body, which is called sitting duck. Cassina explained with a show of seriousness. Generally, only female humans can make this sitting position after practicing. If you want this position to look more beautiful, you need to increase the tenacity of your knee joint and hip joint. The basics of the battle god genre starts from practicing your legs instead of building your muscles. Sitting duck is the basic of all basic trainings. Of course, it was also the cutest, feminine might position. Cassina decided to ignore this and said nothing. But, I'm a man. In front of Cassina, Yunshi stopped pretending. He had never really regarded himself as a maid. I don't mind. Cassina patted his shoulders with a generous attitude. I mind it. Yunshi almost went crazy. No one wouldn't go crazy in the face of such a teacher. TSK. Not bad. Cassina ignored his word and walked around him with her naked feet, lightly kicking his body from time to time. From her foot feelings, Cassina found that Yunshi's body was more soft than when he was wearing the White Emperor mask. Yunshi himself didn't realize that when he wore the maid uniform, he had a quiet, gentle temperament. This was soft, the core of practicing the soft body. Yunshi had mastered this key point without learning. Keep this position for 2 hours, then you can start to practice the next position. Cassina laid back down on the bed and picked up the wine from Hydra. It was a wine made of Hydra's virulent blood, which could kill 1 million people with its poisonousness. Only the legend-ranked beings like Cassina, whose body had entered the battle god realm, could enjoy Hydra's poisonous wine without any worry. After taking a sip of the wine, Cassina felt a hot feeling run down along her tongue through her esophagus into her stomach. It was a gift and also a reward from Hydra. Compared to Cassina, who was enjoying the wine, Yunshi was suffering. A gust of heat flowed one after another. The gusts shuttled back and forth in his body. He felt as if he was soaking in a lava pool, but didn't drip a drop of sweat. The uncomfortable feeling made him feel a painful torment. He didn't only feel hot, but also felt sore and numb. He could feel that his body parts were becoming soft when the heat flows passed through. Why does such a simple position make me feel so painful? 2 hours later, Yunshi finally toppled down to the ground and gasped for air. Very good, you just created the longest record of keeping the sitting duck position amongst all my disciples. Although Cassina was drunk, she still praised him with appreciation. Although it was the basic of the battle god genre, none of her disciples could keep this position longer than 1 hour. The heat flows she transferred into Yunshi's body weren't something simple. They could help Yunshi adjust his body breathing and were the essential factors to test his physical quality. Yunshi could keep the sitting duck position 2 hours as the heat flows shuttled through his body. It was really a great soft body talent. It seems that my battle god genre finally has a qualified successor, Cassina thought with joy. Chapter 334. Treasure ship style. Can we change to other cultivation methods that are much more common? Yunshi felt that his body was like a rusty machine of gears, groaning with creaking sounds and pain. Oh, what kind of cultivation method do you like? Cassina looked at him curiously. At present, he was so tired that he didn't even want to move a finger. Teaching students according to their aptitude is also very important. I did several rounds of limit practices before. He answered honestly. 1,000 push-ups, 1,000 sit-ups, 1,000 squats, and ran 100 kilometers and brandish sword for 10,000 times. It was a classic limit practice that could only be finished after using up all one's strength. If he didn't use the green hippo's seed to refresh himself, he probably couldn't finish 1 round of limit practice. Limit practice? You mean that? Cassina shrugged her shoulders and touched his head with a pity. Fortunately, it's not too late to stop that practicing method. No, it's not a bad practicing method, however. There is a strong side effect with it. Well, I don't need to tell him about it. Anyway, with my guidance, he doesn't need to practice that skill that would make him lose hair, cough, that secret skill with a strong sequela. Well, can you try push-ups first? It was such a basic practicing method, but it was undeniable that it was a thoroughly tempered skill that worked best for mankind. Okay, he stretched out his arms and legs. He found that his resilience had really been increased and the rhythm of his breath had also been changed. The blessing of the water god was changing his body unconsciously. This process was still ongoing. Hydra was still with him. 1, 2, 3. Yunshi naturally put his hands on the ground and started to do push-ups. After 3 times, he felt something heavy was put on his back. Instantly, a fragrance with alcohol and the feeling of warm skin came from his back. Master Cassina? Call me teacher from now on. Keep going. Cassina stretched out her toes and stepped her feet on the acupressure points on Yunshi's back. Gee! An aching cold feeling spread through his whole body from his spine. He couldn't help but emit a strange groan from his mouth. His body parts that were being stepped on by her shivered and twisted. He found out with shame that his body had a reaction that should never appear at this moment. Little guy, be more attentive to your practice. She smiled and tapped her foot at the back of his neck. Her naked toes didn't contain any smell of sweat but had a nice smell like a blooming flower in the dry desert. Remember, this is the second position of the basic battle god genre, treasure ship style. Compared to the first position sitting duck, which was used to increase the resilience of one's body, the second position treasure ship style requires a higher coordination degree of all body parts, especially the connection points of joints. If Yunshi practiced without any guidance, he would probably hurt himself. Cassina didn't like the disciples who learned by rote but liked the disciples who learned using their own body. Through her toes that were pressing on his back, She guided his body to shake regularly. His hands supported by the ground and his body shook like a tiny boat in a tempestuous storm. Ha, ha, he felt as if he was being drowned in an endless sea. His hands were indeed supported by the ground, but he could feel that the whole world was shaking. No, it wasn't his imagination. The area around him was indeed shaking like in a storm. She could even reverse the rules of the sky and earth. To accomplish this was just a piece of cake for her. Don't stop, keep moving. Once his moves slightly slowed down, she would scold and punish him relentlessly. Once her soft toes increased strength on his back, he would feel a mind-blowing pain like a ship that was going to fall. However, every time this ship would really fall, she would infuse new energy into his body and let him feel the cold feeling on his back, arousing him from a faint. Therefore, he had to suffer the circulation of dying, being saved by her energy, dying over and over again. This kid is more tenacious than I guess. Sitting on his back and drinking the wine from time to time, she observed his performance with surprise. Generally, people with great talents were prideful, so they didn't like to pay too much attention on fundamental training. None of her disciples were common people. They were all great geniuses in the eyes of the public, and after becoming her disciples, they became more confident and rushed courageously when learning her skills. However, only when they did fundamental training, they all thought that it was unnecessary and didn't need to pay too much attention to it. In some sense, they were right. As super geniuses with godlike talents, they could understand the elements of combat skills 3 times faster, or even faster, than ordinary people, and they also knew the importance of laying a good foundation for their bodies. This was the reason why they could be Cassina's disciples. Since I have built a wonderful foundation for my body, I don't need to waste more time on this. They all thought. It would be great if they can be patient like you. Cassina shook her head at her past disciples, although they were already good enough in the eyes of others. There is no enough when building a foundation for one's body, it's a work of a lifetime. When my previous disciples understand this, they will finally find the door of the legend rank and create their own godlike martial arts. Compared to them, this little guy can even use my magnificent of sky dance, and he is still practicing hard on the basic positions of sitting duck and treasure ship style. Probably he himself hasn't realized what a great talent he has. The blessing from Hydra can't be something simple. The ship is going to capsize. Yunshi felt as if his hands were pressing on the sea surface. His body was so limp that he couldn't even squeeze out one last bit of energy. His strength had given out after the long practice. Let's bring this to a close for today. Cassina leapt back to her throne and looked down at him, who was lying on the floor faintly. Not bad, you are a good ship. Chapter 335, A Small Temptation. After finishing the unexpected practice, Yunshi slowly walked back to his room with fatigue and fell on his bed. Tired, I'm too tired. He didn't even want to open his eyes. If he hadn't eaten the last golden bread on his way back to his room, he would have fainted about halfway. Cassina's martial arts, especially the second position treasure ship style, even squeezed out the remaining energy from his body. Fortunately, he didn't tell her that he was also a hero-ranked baker and ate his last 4th-ranked bread, otherwise, he would probably sleep on the floor. Although he complained, he still accepted the fact that he had become Cassina's disciple. Since I can't refuse her, I have to accept it and adjust myself. Moreover, Cassina means no harm, doesn't she? Good night, to myself. Everything will be fine tomorrow. I can't concede. After encouraging himself, he closed his eyes and went off to dreamland. I smell a very nice and familiar fragrance. A light smell of herb, a strong smell of milk, and the smell of honey. They are all mixed up dexterously. No, there is other smells, the delicate fragrance of a young girl. He opened his eyes, seeing a flower blooming in the garden of 100 flowers, swaying in the wind. For a moment, he thought that he was still in the water god's world and this was another roseate night. He habitually stretched out his hand that was a heartbeat away from the cute little rabbit. No, it isn't right. I have left the water god's world. Looking at Lulu's eyes full of hope and expectations, he trembled and realized that he had almost made another mistake. Finally, his fingers lightly dropped down and pinched a strand of Lulu's hair. This behavior shouldn't have overstepped the boundary. My, good morning. He could see that she was slightly disappointed. It seemed that she was looking for something to happen. Danger, danger. I had almost exposed myself. His back soaked in cold sweat. Lulu shouldn't know that Mai was the White Emperor. She didn't even know the name Yunshi. She closed her eyes and waited for something. It must be just her instinct. Her cute, meek look almost made him think that he was still in the water god's world and he was still the White Emperor who married a million brides. Fortunately, he wasn't wearing the White Emperor mask and reined in on the brink of a precipice, so he could still keep his secret. The White Emperor mask didn't disappear. Hydra's White Emperor avatar was just wearing a replica of the mask, and because it was Hydra's avatar, no one could find that the mask was a fake. The real White Emperor mask was still in Yunshi's hands and was his exclusive artifact as the only reward he obtained from the trial of the Water God's Fantasy Island. In other words, once he put on the silver mask, he would become the White Emperor again, who could control the Water Mistfield and the Mist Soul Army. After leaving the Water God's world, the power of the mask was decreased, but could still let him enter the hero rank, becoming the perfect White Emperor. Lulu, good morning. Looking at Lulu, whose appearance didn't change after leaving the Water God's world, he felt as if a generation had passed. He just spent a month in the Water God's world, but he felt he had lived a lifetime there. The White Emperor was the savior of the world and the Water God's bride. If he didn't still have the mask, he would doubt if the White Emperor was really himself. Mai, we will arrive at the Sword Palace soon. After that small temptation, she quickly returned to normal. However, her shaking rabbit ears exposed her true emotion. Before entering the Water God's world were just common acquaintances. To him, she was just one of the girls who had his seed. However, they both had a feeling that they had a different relationship now. Yunshi obtained a new talent from Lulu's seed, pharmacist. He had never learned pharmaceutics, but through her seed, he mastered this knowledge totally. At the same time, she also obtained his sword skill talent and his strong mentality talent. Lulu wasn't the only person who obtained his mentality talent but the entire Starwing Knights girls. It happened after he became a hero-ranked baker in the Water God's world. After that, over 10 new girls reached the 3rd rank. Lulu had the highest intimacy with Yunshi, so she obtained the most benefit and reached the peak of the 3rd rank. She wasn't a girl who was good at sword skill in the past, but she had touched the edge of the hero rank as a female swordsman at this moment. Not only that, through the seed, he could see that she had also touched the edge of the hero rank as a pharmacist. Apart from Yunshi, she would probably become the 2nd member who obtained 2 hero-ranked careers in the Starwing Knights. Her rabbit ears were proofs of her pharmacist talent. Amongst all members of the Starwing Knights, only she still kept her appearance from the Water God's world. Chapter 336, Sky Tower. The rabbit ears not only stood for her aroused pharmacist talent, but was also a symbol of her choice and belief. Originally, she had decided to live in the Water God's world as the White Emperor's bride, but finally changed her mind and left. No one knew the reason behind it. After that, she returned to the Sword Palace camp together with the other Starwing Knights girls. It looked like they didn't change too much from before entering the Water God's world. However, only they themselves knew that something had changed, like a white paper which was discolored. It couldn't be called white paper again. The two characters in Lulu's heart had blended, the two distinct paths had combined into one. At this moment, she only looked at Yunshi silently and gently, remaining indifferent whether granted favors or subjected to humiliation. The common Lulu had disappeared. At this moment, the girl who looked at Yunshi with her gentle eyes was the princess of the White Emperor, the core of the Mist Soul Army. Being gazed at by Lulu, although he believed that his disguise was perfect, he still wondered whether she had found something. Have we arrived at the Sword Palace? Yunshi felt guilty and changed the topic stiffly, but he indeed felt a bit surprised. Originally, if he took the White Lotus floating ship, the trip from the Eye of Storm to the Sword Palace would spend several days. But now, Cassina's floating ship the Sands of Time only flew a day and a night, and now they had arrived at the destination. It deserved to be the 6th Sky Sword's floating ship. The crashed White Lotus could fly at a supersonic speed, and the sands of time was 10 times faster than the White Lotus. Yes. Lulu nodded and held his hand naturally. They walked out of the room and came to the floor. Look, it's the Sword Palace, the peak point of the entire White Lotus sword domain. Oh God, it's really a lotus. I thought that it was just a tail. It's said that the White Lotus secret treasure is hiding there, but no one has found it. The girls gathered together and exclaimed, looking at the buildings under the floating ship. It's beautiful. Basking in the sun, Yunshi squinted his eyes and saw the real appearance of the White Lotus Sword Palace. Amongst all lower-level sword domains, the Sword Palace in White Lotus Sword Domain was the most special one. Sword-shaped mountains were all over the Sword Palace, and these mountains formed a layer of sword formations, one layer after another. The core of the Sword Palace was a huge white lotus formed by these sword formations. Looking down from the floor of the floating ship, the entire White Lotus Sword Palace was like a lotus blooming at the peak of this world, emitting infinite sword-shaped lights. No wonder that it's Yunhai, the Sword Master's heritage. Even a lot of middle-level sword domains don't have such a special sword palace. A lot of students will come to this sword palace year after year, and some of them are even from other gods' domains. Look, the Sky Tower. Quickly, everyone shifted their attentions to the core of the sword palace, where there was a tall tower. It was made of unknown materials, soaring into the sky. It was even taller than the height of the floating ship, and even though they raised their heads, they couldn't see the top of the tower. Even in daytime, people could see countless mysterious lights that crossed, gathered, and spread out from the tower to the end of the boundless starry sky. This is the Sky Tower. Yunshi bated his breath and looked up at the tall tower, which was known as the symbol of the endless gods' domains. In the Eastern Gods' Domain, people called it Sky Tower. In the Western Gods' Domain, people called it God Tower. In the Dragon Gods' Domain, people called it Dragon Tower. No word was exaggerated in describing this tower, because it was the crystallization of wisdom of the endless gods' domains, one of the biggest wonders in the entire universe. It was said that the technique that was used to build this tower was derived from the first era of the endless gods' domains. Only the gods' domains with massive intelligent beings and advanced civilization had the material and financial resources and energy to build a sky tower. Sky Tower was the symbol of high civilization and the sign of the Star Bridge, which connected countless gods' domains. No one knew how vast the entire universe was, and amongst different gods' domains, there were boundless void measured in lengths of light years. By the use of the star bridges, people in different gods' domains could travel to other worlds. Because of the star bridges, the countless gods' domains could be connected together, forming this vibrant union of gods' domains. Without star bridges, common people didn't have any method to move between two gods' domains. And a star bridge could only be built between two sky towers. The star bridges were the threads of the traffic network of the gods' domains, and the sky towers were the nodes of this universe-class network. Who built the first sky tower? And when was the first sky tower built? It was an untraceable history. But they had become the indispensable parts of this vibrant universe. A star bridge corresponded to two sky towers. Originally, White Lotus was just a lower-level sword domain, and it was not worthy to build a sky tower here. At the most, it could only have a transfer station between two star bridges. Fortunately, because of Yunhai the Sword Master, White Lotus Sword Domain once upgraded to be a middle-level sword domain in the past, and this sky tower was built in that period. Even a lot of middle-level sword domains couldn't obtain a sky tower of their own. Every sky tower stood for the civilization of the gods' domain. Sky Tower would only be built at the most prosperous region of a civilization. The Sword Palace was such a core of the entire White Lotus sword domain, the king on the tip of this sword. Chapter 337, The Legend of Seven Towers. Bang, bang. For a reason Yunshi didn't know, his heart pounded fast when he saw the Sky Tower and Star Bridge. Why? He didn't think that he had seen them before, but he felt like he did see them in the past. The lines on the tower and the clouds around the tower were just inorganic materials. Although it was a wonder that connected different worlds and couldn't be alive, he could hear a special breathing from it. The breathing was old and long, filled with a trace of time, which made him feel as if it was even older than this world. How do you feel about it? Did you get shocked? Cassina walked to Yunshi's side. My teacher, the Sky Tower, what is it? He had a strong feeling that there was a connection between himself and the tower at the peak of the entire White Lotus Sword domain. Well, I only know a few tales. It said that long, long ago, an unknown person built the first Sky Tower for some reason. It was a beautiful, vibrant green tower. However, some people felt that it was a pity that only one Sky Tower existed in this universe, and it was unfair, so they forced the person to build a second tower. It said that it was a magnificent tower guarded by dragons. After that, the third, the fourth, a total of 7 towers were built in that era. The Sky Towers now are all the 7 towers projections. For example, the Sky Tower in front of us is the projection of the Sky Tower of Sky Sword God's domain. As for who built the 7 towers and for what purpose, no one now knows. Cassina shrugged her shoulders. It was a legend above legends, which happened even before her tribe formed. Everything had been buried under the surface of the long river of history. Perhaps only the masters of the 7 towers knew who built the towers. By the way, it's still unclear which of the 7 towers is the first tower, and people have fought for making this clear many rounds. From ancient times to the present, the battle of the 7 towers is still going on. Due to a reason Yunshi didn't understand, a drop of sweat dripped to the ground from his forehead. He had a really bad feeling about the battle of the 7 towers. What's the rank of the original, of our Sky Tower? He knew it wasn't wise to ask this, but he couldn't stop his curiosity. Well, the 6th. There are many elements when determining the rank of a Sky Tower, and they will be re-ranked every 100 years. Cassina said embarrassedly, however, it wasn't because we are weak. I never lost a game in Battle Gods Championship contest and I earned a lot of points for our tower. However, we lost a lot of points in other things in the last 1,000 years. 5,000 years ago, our tower was often in the top 3 and sometimes was the number 1. The reason why the rank of our tower has dropped to the 6th is complicated. The main reason is the gods' domains attached to other towers developed a lot of special careers, which greatly increased the score of their towers. Yunshi listened to Cassina's words but was not fully understanding. He looked at the Sky Tower and quietly remembered this in his heart. It seemed that the rank of a tower didn't only depend on the fighting capacity it had relationships with a lot of other factors. However, why did the masters of the 7 towers fight for the rank of their towers? Does it mean anything? It's hard to understand. Why did the Sky Tower of Eastern God's domain drop to the second last? Besides, apart from the God Tower of Western God's domain and the Dragon Tower of Dragon God's domain, where are the remaining 4 towers? Why didn't I hear anything about them? As the wonders of the entire universe, shouldn't they all be famous? Without any noise, although the speed of the sands of time was extremely fast, it flew in quiet, as if it wasn't having a high-speed descent in the sky. Standing on the floor, Yunshi didn't feel any change in the gravity. The floating ship smoothly landed on the core area of the White Lotus Sword Palace. Immediately, one light bridge after another fell down to the ship, forming corridors for the passengers. Go on and enjoy your new life here, but don't forget to come to my room this night. Cassina patted on Yunshi's shoulders and stretched out herself after that. She straightly ignored the greeting part of the Sword Palace and went back to her room. Looking at his teacher who was going to have a short doze, Yunshi smiled bitterly. My teacher is really willful. Perhaps this is her right as a strong being. Let's jump down. Hua was unhappy with the fact that her Mai was exclusively possessed by Cassina and she couldn't do anything about it. Finally, Cassina left and she found this opportunity, so she pulled his hand quickly. Jump down from this place. Yunshi was confused. Aren't there light bridges? They are long but definitely safe. Yes, let's jump down here. Hua laughed. She had decided to do this before they set out. Isn't it good to do daring and interesting things with my lover? 1, 2, 3. Before he could complain, she had jumped down from the 1,000 meters height while holding his hand tightly. Wua! Yunshi screamed in the air. Hua, can't you be a gentle girl? My little she is the best. Hua laughed in the air and forgot everything unhappy before. In the sensation of asphyxia due to the high-speed descent, there were only him and her in the world. This was a big world, but in the range of 1 meter, this was their own private space for two lovers. No matter whether it is the battle god Cassina or the water god Hydra, none of them could tear us apart. Let the endless blue sky be our witness, he and I will never part. Chapter 338. Announcement. Flying was forever a dream of all mankind. Because humans weren't born with wings, they could only live on the ground and look at the winged beings with envy. Mankind was given a scorned word for a name from the winged ones, landworm. People were angry about it, but couldn't retort. Only when the humans who had reached the hero rank could surpass the limit of flesh and blood and fly in the air. However, it was just a privilege that belonged to very few humans. Even amongst 100 hero-ranked beings, it was hard to find one person who could fly freely like winged beings. Even the Lamia Queen, the Mermaid Queen and the Celian Queen couldn't do it. It was too difficult to accomplish the dream of flying for the races who had no wings. Fortunately, Yunshi was one of the few people who had the experience of flying. Stepping on the crane wing's twin swords, he could overcome the pull of gravity and fly in the air momentarily. However, it wasn't a fall he was experiencing now. The pull of gravity, the hollow feeling after losing any supporting point, and the sensation of asphyxia due to falling, all proved that Yunshi was still a mortal who couldn't fly. Compared to him, she looked more comfortable. Although she had no wings, she was indeed enjoying the pleasant sensation of falling. Yunshi was clearly sure that it was her true feelings. Unlike ordinary humans, she could be considered as another being. The falling to your death was just a simple and interesting game to her. She was born with a superpower and flying was like an instinct of her body. If he didn't know she really didn't have wings, he would think that she was an angel in the tales of Western God's domain. Dropping to the ground from 1,000 meters height would only take a few seconds, but with his sensations, he felt as if he had spent a whole life with Ouroboros. From life to death, they held each other's hand, working together toward a faraway world. He almost subconsciously put on the White Emperor mask and summoned the water mist field to support himself and stop in the air. He never expected that she would do this. It was unusual. He felt as if she was acting rashly because she felt wronged. In his memory, he only saw her like this once, when his sword skill teacher tried to teach him something that wasn't in any textbook in her room. Is she being jealous? A vague idea, which was close to the right answer, appeared in his mind. Boom. When they were about 10 meters away from the ground and could see the frightened tutor's pale faces clearly, a transparent light halo appeared under her feet. The dream of all mankind, the miracle of a lifetime, the barrier even to hero-ranked beings was broken by Ouroboros at this moment. Flying. The power of the sky-flying bloodline. She stepped on the light halo, suspended in the air. She could go to any place she wanted using this method. As the light halo broke down into sparkles and disappeared, Ouroboros held Yunshi's hand, nimbly jumping to the ground. The tutors started shouting, "What? How can this be possible? What is happening?" To the people who hadn't witnessed Ouroboros' sky-flying sword, even if they were hero-ranked people, they couldn't understand how she did it. "I'm coming, White Lotus Sword Palace," Ouroboros announced to the entire Sword Palace proudly. No one could stop her footsteps. She would bring victory. No matter if it was the White Lotus secret treasure or Yunshi, she was confident enough to have them all. From now on, she wouldn't hide her power, she wouldn't hide her light. After her experiences in the water god's world, she realized that she suppressed her power too much in the past. She wouldn't suffer another such failure again. "Look, she is my maid, she is my private property, none of you can have any designs on her." Lifting up Yunshi's hand, Ouroboros triumphantly announced her ownership of this beautiful black-haired maid in front of everyone. On the floating ship The Sands of Time, Cassina rocked with laughter after hearing Ouroboros' surprising announcement. "Ha ha ha ha, this is too dramatic. She deserves to have that bloodline. The Sword Palace will become hustle and bustle soon. How big a storm will she bring to the entire Sword Palace?" On the floor, the Starwing Knights girls looked at the girl who just announced her ownership of their Mai with a strange look. Ouroboros clenched her white golden crossed sword tightly. Her shivering golden hair showed how agitated her heart was. "She is the strongest genius, Xiao Cao gazed at Hua Hua with a burning will in her eyes. No. My belongs to us all. Ling Ling raised her hand and protested. It is too much to take away our Mai in this manner. Strange. Why? Mai Lan pressed her hand to her chest, looking at Mai with a puzzled expression. Lulu took a deep breath. The will in her eyes became firmer as her rabbit ears hung down. Enemy, strong enemy. White Lotus stared at Hua Hua with a serious look. Her fingers counted, trying to calculate and find a method to defeat this strong enemy. Quickly, enemy. Where? Red Lotus looked at her sister in confusion. They were at the White Lotus Sword Palace, their home field. Where did the enemy come from? Sister, you don't understand. Chapter 339, Challenge I, Hua Hua, am the strongest freshman. I don't like weak people, or the people who don't know their limitations and dare to challenge me. I will become the new owner of the White Lotus secret treasure, and that's my purpose for coming here. After her first failure in the water god's world, some special character was aroused inside Hua Hua's body. Her talent was far beyond the limit of everyone. In the small town, she was the undoubted strongest genius. Because of this, including Yun Shi, they knew just how strong she was, but no one had realized to what degree her real talent and combat power had reached. Until they came to the water god's world, and he had become the White Emperor who was blessed by the entire world and was wearing 3 artifacts, he finally realized just how strong her real strength could be. Common hero-ranked people couldn't even hold out against her for a few seconds in the face of her attacks. With her sky-flying power, she could launch a surprise attack against her enemy at any time and from any angle. Even if she was forced into a corner, her body contained almost endless energy, and she would become stronger and stronger while being trapped in that dilemma. She was like a hero in the fairy tales of the Western domains or an immortal in the stories of the Eastern domains. As the only person who once drove her into a tight corner, he was the only person who knew just how invincible she was. Her future is unlimited. Even now, her power was sufficient to beat down most beings in the White Lotus Sword domain. Apart from Cassina and Hydra, who were at the legend rank, it was very likely that none of the other people could defeat her. And now, she was only 16 years old. No one could predict what kind of achievements she would make in the future, because she was doomed to become the most eye-catching, brightest star in the starry sky. The small failure in the water god's world didn't get her down. Instead, it stimulated her belief of becoming stronger to a higher degree. At present, she stood in front of everyone, facing all eyes from disciples and tutors of the Sword Palace alike. She announced her heartfelt feelings proudly, which would definitely push her to everyone's opposite side. The White Lotus secret treasure was the deepest, most secret desire in everyone's heart. Not one of the disciples of the Sword Palace didn't dream of obtaining this legendary secret treasure. There were a lot of tales about the secret treasure. As time went by, the tales didn't reduce but increased at a stable speed. No one knew the real look of this secret treasure, because the secret treasure in the White Lotus Sword Palace was just a projection of the original, which couldn't even be regarded as the tip of an iceberg. However, the projection had helped hundreds of people reach the hero rank. More or less, the people who touched the projection all obtained amazing benefits. All of them did try to find the original of the projection, but none of them had succeeded. Over time, the White Lotus secret treasure not only became a symbol of White Lotus Sword domain, but also become famous in the entire Sky Sword God's domain. Every time the Sword Palace started to recruit disciples, a lot of elites would come to White Lotus Sword domain from other domains. There were even students from foreign high-level sword domains, and the reason they came here was all for the projection of the secret treasure. At this moment, Hua Hua's words was a challenge to the entire White Lotus Sword Palace. Even the tutors of the Sword Palace thought that she was too pretentious. Is there anyone who disagrees? No problem, I accept challenges from everyone. I know there is a ring for accepting the challenge, why don't we go there? She was already itching to beat down the disciples who were looking at her with displeasure. There was actually a reason she chose the White Lotus Sword Palace. Her talent was so great that she could choose all sword palaces at will, even if she wanted to go to the Great Shia Sword Palace, the #1 sword palace of this god's domain, she wouldn't be refused entrance. However, no one had found the original of the secret treasure, but everyone knew it was indeed in the White Lotus sword domain. To be precise, in the sword tip area of this sword domain. Even her sky-flying bloodline longed for it, because it was a treasure that Yunhai the sword master didn't obtain. Only this treasure was good enough for her and could become a part of her bloodline. If any of you can defeat me, I will give up my pursuit of the secret treasure. Now, come on, come here, let me see how strong you are. Oh, incidentally, the people who will be defeated by me must swear that they will never have designs on my Mai. I will kill anyone who doesn't keep his word. Mai is mine, no one can pursue her. She was proud and confident, perfect and persistent. She just witnessed a brand new side of his childhood sweetheart. He wasn't the only person who learned something in the water god's world. After experiencing her failure, Hua was also transforming. From the strongest genius in the small town to the strongest genius in the entire White Lotus sword domain, she was doomed to step on a road that no one could catch up on. Ordinary people couldn't be compared with her, a super genius. No, she shouldn't even be called a genius, she should be called a monster. Are you trying to make me laugh? Who are you? How dare you challenge your predecessors? Humph, interesting. Let me see what gives you the guts to challenge us all. Yes, it seems that it's the time to teach this freshman a lesson. Even if you are the strongest freshman, you are just a freshman. I advise you to be more modest. Let's go to the ring. I will let you know what the meaning of frog in the well is. This is the White Lotus Sword Palace, not the countryside you lived in. Rustic, learn to be modest. The Sword Palace disciples were all provoked. They were all young geniuses and none of them were afraid of the challenge. They didn't notice that the black-haired maid behind her was looking at them with a mournful expression of pity, as if they were a group of prisoners under sentence of death. You guys know nothing about power. How dare you challenge Hua when she was in such an excited state? You will soon know what an unwise choice you just made. Very good. Will you come one after another or challenge me altogether? She looked at these predecessors and smiled, which was really a tiger's smile in his eyes. May God help you. You poor predecessors. Chapter 340. Carry them out. Undoubtedly, Zhu Zhen was a genius in the eyes of everyone. Since 3 years of age, he had shown a great sword arts talent. In the Sky Sword God's domain, sword arts was the most eminent. Apart from the sword, nothing else was distinguished. Therefore, as a child who was born with great sword arts talent, he lived with praise and envy from everyone. From childhood to present, he was always the compared and praised object when other children's parents scolded them. Whatever it was, he could do everything perfectly and easily. No matter whether it came to study or practicing his sword skill. He was always the best amongst the children of his age. He was even far better than the children who were older than him. When he was 16 years old, he came to the Sword Palace and was already a third-ranked swordsman. It was a great achievement even amongst all the Sword Palace disciples, and he was only a step away from the top 10 disciples. The hero rank was like a reachless dream for ordinary people, and even for most of the Sword Palace disciples, but it wasn't a problem for him. Several months ago, he had touched the edge of the hero rank, and vaguely realized what road he should step on. He didn't try to enter the hero rank immediately, because he wanted to accumulate much more experience before that. He wanted to accomplish it perfectly. He had the wild ambition and confidence that when he entered the hero rank, he could immediately rank into the list of top 10 Sword Palace disciples and let everyone know his name. For this, he kept suppressing his true strength and accumulated his experience when practicing, because he wanted to understand the road he would step on deeper. He would become the number 1 amongst all third-ranked Sword Palace disciples. He believed in this firmly. He never doubted that he was born for stepping onto a higher stage. He would walk out of the White Lotus sword domain and witness the prosperous high-level sword domains with his own eyes. His goal was the White Lotus secret treasure. He thought if he could accomplish the dream of all disciples, obtaining this treasure, he would become a great legend just like Yunhai the Swordmaster. Bang! A thud stopped Zhu Zhen's thinking. He slowly opened his eyes and looked at the bloody figure on the ground indifferently. Carry him out. Who is next? Hua waved her hand as a sign, Then the disciples around the ring quickly came up and carried the 13th loser out. She defeated Child Tai Yuan. He is an elite disciple from a high-level sword domain. She wasn't just boasting. Perhaps she is really the #1 freshman. Did you see how she beat Child Tai Yuan down? After he was carried out, a rumpus raised amongst the disciples around the ring. Undoubtedly, the power Hua just showed shocked everyone. They realized that this #1 freshman wasn't simple. The weakest disciple who challenged her was at the peak of the 2nd rank. Child Tai Yuan was a real genius who had touched the peak of the 3rd rank. Even so, he just held on for a few seconds when facing her. For her, it was like breaking a dead branch from a tree when she beat them down. Till now, she had defeated 13 disciples who dared to challenge her, and everyone was facing the same result, being carried out laying on a stretcher made of door planks. It's my showtime now. Zhuzhen held his sword. His sword was 3 feet long and called Cold Moon. It was a top-class spirit weapon his family found for him. From 5 years old, this sword was always with him. The sword was literally growing up with him. After he reached the hero rank, this sword would keep growing up with him until it became his god weapon. He had a foreboding though. Today would become a very special day to him. As the #1 disciple of the previous term, in the face of the #1 disciple of this term, his heart was itching for a fight. It was an emotion called excitement, because as a genius who often challenged the people that were far stronger than him, he saw his past self when looking at Hua. Oh, I'm her predecessor and the #1 3rd-ranked disciple. Should I teach her a lesson gently? Or show her the ruthlessness of the rated battles of the Sword Palace without mercy? When he looked at her confident face, he knew she believed that she could defeat everyone here. He smiled. How similar she is with my past self when I first came to the Sword Palace. Although he didn't challenge the entire Sword Palace in front of everyone, he did challenge all top 10 disciples when he had just arrived. Of course, his challenge ended after he was defeated 10 times. The top 10 disciples had all reached the hero rank, who had the chance to touch the projection of the secret treasure, and he had just reached the 3rd rank at that time. Defeating him was as easy as blowing off dust to them. Only after reaching the hero rank, one would have the chance to enter the list of the top 10 disciples. Thousands of years ago, it had almost become an iron rule of the White Lotus Sword Palace. And only the disciples in the list of the top 10 would have a chance to touch the projection of the secret treasure and try to be recognized by it. The top 10 disciples now were all Zhuzhen's challenging goals. He had decided to challenge them again after he reached the hero rank. Now, he looked at her as if she was his innocent past self. There were 2 ways to graduate from the White Lotus Sword Palace. First, reach the peak of the 3rd rank within 5 years. After that, the disciple would officially graduate as an ordinary disciple of the Sword Palace. Second, become a top 10 disciple and gain acceptance from the projection of the secret treasure. After that, the disciple will be recognized as an authentic disciple of the Sword Palace and be invited to enter a higher world. Apparently, there was a world of difference between the 2 ways of graduating. All geniuses who had confidence in themselves would feel ashamed to graduate in the first way. Only the people who gain recognition from the projection of the White Lotus secret treasure were the authentic disciples of the Sword Palace, and all the other people were losers. They only got a certificate of graduation from the Sword Palace with nothing more. As for the disciples who didn't reach the peak of the 3rd rank within 5 years, they wouldn't even obtain the certificate of graduation. When graduating, the disciples who obtained the White Lotus badge were the official graduates. However, only the disciples who wore the Ice Lotus badge on their chests at that time were the authentic disciples of the Sword Palace. Chapter 342, Nobody Beats the Crowd fell into silence. Around the ring, nobody spoke. Even if a needle had fell down onto the ground, the sound would be heard by everyone now. The strongest person under the hero rank, Zhuzhen, was defeated. Immediately after that, the 10th disciple, Luo Su of the Broken Iron Sword, was defeated, and he was the first hero-ranked disciple who toppled down to the ground. The 9th disciple, Wang Qi of the Steel Scale Sword, was defeated. He was born in the Great Yuan Sword domain and good at frontal attack. The 8th disciple, Bai Yun of the White Light Sword, was defeated. He was born in the White Lotus Sword domain and returned to this domain specially from a high-level sword domain. The seventh disciple, Xie Huanzhen of the Blood Sword, was defeated. He was a noble born in an aristocratic family of the Great Shang Sword domain. The sixth disciple, Shenyuan Xiaoye of the Ice Spirit Sword, was defeated. She was a talented girl born in the Great Ju Sword domain and was good at the Ice-type sword skill. The fifth disciple, Shimen Liuyun of the Three-Blade Sword, was defeated and his standard god weapon was broken. He was a genius born in the Great Hand Sword domain. The fourth disciple, Qin Su of the Son of Heaven, was defeated. He was a real prince born to an imperial family of the Great Qin Sword domain. His sword, the Son of Heaven, was an inherited god weapon and the first sword Hua didn't break. From the 10th to the 4th, they were the pride of the White Lotus Sword Palace, but none of them could withstand her attack. Even if their swords were standard god weapons, their swords couldn't stay in one piece in the face of her broken sword. Only Qin Su's sword, which was a real high-level god weapon, could survive her attack. After that, even the top 3 disciples, the strongest 3 people, were defeated. The third disciple, Yin Su of the Ghost Sword, was defeated. She was one of the candidates of the future master of the Ghost Sword domains, and her Ghost Sword was the inherited god weapon of that domain. The second disciple, Rod of the Dragon Shield Sword, was defeated. He was a talented swordsman from the distant Dragon God's domain and his sword was a patrimonial sword of his hero family. The first disciple, Xia Ling of the Dragon Soul Sword, was defeated. She was a princess of the Great Xia Sword domain and her twin swords could transform into 2 dragons. She once took part in the junior class of the Battle Gods Championship contest and had possessed the throne as the number 1 for 3 years. Although she was thought of as the strongest female swordsman, she was still defeated. When her twin swords were knocked out of her hands and the dragon soul of flame and lightning collapsed and disappeared from her body, everything that happened had took their breath looking at this scene. They just witnessed the start of a brand new era, a moment that was doomed to be recorded in the history of the White Lotus Sword Palace. As a freshman, Hua challenged the top 10 disciples on the very first day she came to the White Lotus Sword Palace, and crushed them all through her overwhelming strength. There was never such a strong freshman like her in the history of the Sword Palace. No, the Ice Lotus badge wasn't even good enough for her. All the disciples understood a truth after seeing her battle style: we are not beings at the same level. The White Lotus Sword Palace is just a shallow pool to her. A whale like her shouldn't stay here. My goal is the White Lotus secret treasure. She looked around and found no one dared to challenge her again. She showed a helpless look. Did I scare them too bad? When I was in the Water God's world, I was driven up the wall by the White Emperor. At that time, I was so eager to release my hidden bloodline power from my body. Now, I finally made a step forward, but why are the disciples in the Sword Palace so weak? Only the last girl made me become a bit serious, and I was just crushing the others. You guys are already at the hero rank. Originally, I could find so many topics talking with the twin witches, and I know they are not inferior to me, but why are the others in the Sword Palace so weak? Cough. On the ring, Xia Ling stood up with a kind of stagger. She gazed at Hua with an unbelievable look. From now on, you are the number 1 disciple of the White Lotus Sword domain. Xia Ling was born in the strongest sword domain, the Great Xia Sword domain, and was once taught by a sky sword for a period of time. To her, the thing that happened just now was like a nightmare. This 16-year-old girl named Hua shouldn't stay in the White Lotus Sword domain. Even in the strongest Great Xia Sword domain, where 3 sky swords developed, she was still amongst the queue of the strongest. Xia Ling admitted that she didn't even know where her limit was. It looked like defeat the top 10 disciples wasn't even harder than trample a group of ants to death to her. Xia Ling couldn't even feel her discontent when she defeated her. What a monster she is. Why didn't she go take part in the Battle Gods Championship contest? If she went, there wouldn't be any position for other geniuses. It couldn't even be called a battle but was just an experience of being crushed. The stronger they were, the more distance between their powers they could feel. Even comparing Hua with the monsters Xia Ling had seen in the Battle Gods Championship contest, she didn't think that the other monsters would stand a chance of winning against her. Does anyone want to challenge me? With expectations, She drew out her broken sword and looked around again. No one replied. Some predecessors even pinched their faces, trying to prove that this was just a ridiculous dream. However, several girls of the Starwing Knights itched for a try, but finally didn't come to the ring. I still need time. You calculated the time she needed before reaching the hero rank. No, not now. Xiao Cao pressed on her sword, stopping it from flying out of the sheath itself. If I can successfully make that medicine, Lulu bit her fingers and thought. Chapter 342, Nobody Beats the Crowd fell into silence. Around the ring, nobody spoke. Even if a needle had fell down onto the ground, the sound would be heard by everyone now. The strongest person under the hero rank, Zhu Zhen, was defeated. Immediately after that, the 10th disciple, Luo Su of the Broken Iron Sword, was defeated, and he was the first hero-ranked disciple who toppled down to the ground. The 9th disciple, Wang Qi of the Steel Scale Sword, was defeated. He was born in the Great Yuan Sword domain and good at frontal attack. The 8th disciple, Bai Yun of the White Light Sword, was defeated. He was born in the White Lotus Sword domain and returned to this domain specially from a high-level sword domain. The 7th disciple, Xie Huanzhen of the Blood Sword, was defeated. He was a noble born in an aristocratic family of the Great Shang Sword domain. The 6th disciple, Shenyuan Xiaoye of the Ice Spirit Sword, was defeated. She was a talented girl born in the Great Ju Sword domain and was good at the Ice-type sword skill. The 5th disciple, Shimen Liuyun of the Three-Blade Sword, was defeated and his standard god weapon was broken. He was a genius born in the Great Hand Sword domain. The 4th disciple, Qin Su of the Son of Heaven, was defeated. He was a real prince born to an imperial family of the Great Qin Sword domain. His sword, the Son of Heaven, was an inherited god weapon and the first sword Hua didn't break. From the 10th to the 4th, they were the pride of the White Lotus Sword Palace, but none of them could withstand her attack. Even if their swords were standard god weapons, their swords couldn't stay in one piece in the face of her broken sword. Only Qin Su's sword, which was a real high-level god weapon, could survive her attack. After that, even the top 3 disciples, the strongest 3 people, were defeated. The 3rd disciple, Yin Su of the Ghost Sword, was defeated. She was one of the candidates of the future master of the Ghost Sword domains, and her Ghost Sword was the inherited god weapon of that domain. The 2nd disciple, Rod of the Dragon Shield Sword, was defeated. He was a talented swordsman from the distant Dragon God's domain and his sword was a patrimonial sword of his hero family. The 1st disciple, Xia Ling of the Dragon Soul Sword, was defeated. She was a princess of the Great Xia Sword domain and her twin swords could transform into 2 dragons. She once took part in the junior class of the Battle Gods Championship contest and had possessed the throne as the number 1 for 3 years. Although she was thought of as the strongest female swordsman, she was still defeated. When her twin swords were knocked out of her hands and the dragon soul of flame and lightning collapsed and disappeared from her body, everything that happened had took their breath looking at this scene. They just witnessed the start of a brand new era, a moment that was doomed to be recorded in the history of the White Lotus Sword Palace. As a freshman, Hua challenged the top 10 disciples on the very first day she came to the White Lotus Sword Palace, and crushed them all through her overwhelming strength. There was never such a strong freshman like her in the history of the Sword Palace. No, the Ice Lotus badge wasn't even good enough for her. All the disciples understood a truth after seeing her battle style: we are not beings at the same level. The White Lotus Sword Palace is just a shallow pool to her. A whale like her shouldn't stay here. My goal is the White Lotus secret treasure. She looked around and found no one dared to challenge her again. She showed a helpless look. Did I scare them too bad? When I was in the Water God's world, I was driven up the wall by the White Emperor. At that time, I was so eager to release my hidden bloodline power from my body. Now, I finally made a step forward, but why are the disciples in the Sword Palace so weak? Only the last girl made me become a bit serious, and I was just crushing the others. You guys are already at the hero rank. Originally, I could find so many topics talking with the twin witches, and I know they are not inferior to me, but why are the others in the Sword Palace so weak? Cough. On the ring, Xia Ling stood up with a kind of stagger. She gazed at Hua with an unbelievable look. From now on, you are the #1 disciple of the White Lotus Sword Domain. Xia Ling was born in the strongest sword domain, the Great Xia Sword Domain, and was once taught by a sky sword for a period of time. To her, the thing that happened just now was like a nightmare. This 16-year-old girl named Hua shouldn't stay in the White Lotus Sword Domain. Even in the strongest Great Xia Sword Domain, where 3 sky swords developed, she was still amongst the queue of the strongest. Xia Ling admitted that she didn't even know where her limit was. It looked like defeat the top 10 disciples wasn't even harder than trample a group of ants to death to her. Xia Ling couldn't even feel her discontent when she defeated her. What a monster she is. Why didn't she go take part in the Battle Gods Championship contest? If she went, there wouldn't be any position for other geniuses. It couldn't even be called a battle but was just an experience of being crushed. The stronger they were, the more distance between their powers they could feel. Even comparing Hua with the monsters Xia Ling had seen in the Battle Gods Championship contest, she didn't think that the other monsters would stand a chance of winning against her. Does anyone want to challenge me? With expectations, she drew out her broken sword and looked around again. No one replied. Some predecessors even pinched their faces, trying to prove that this was just a ridiculous dream. However, several girls of the Starwing Knights itched for a try, but finally didn't come to the ring. I still need time. You calculated the time she needed before reaching the hero rank. No, not now. Xiao Cao pressed on her sword, stopping it from flying out of the sheath itself. If I can successfully make that medicine. Lulu bit her fingers and thought. Chapter 343. The sound of the secret treasure. They were not at the same level with Hua. She correctly judged the true powers of the top 10 disciples. From the 10th to the 4th, they were just some newbies who just reached the hero rank. If Hua got serious, she could end all the battles with one punch. The 4th disciple, the Imperial Genius, Qin Su, was just an inexperienced young man like a hothouse flower. Even though his physical strength was strong, his practical combat skills were terrible. If he didn't have that god weapon, the Son of Heaven, he wouldn't be ranked 4th. The top 3 disciples were really strong hero-ranked opponents. The 3rd disciple, Yin Su, sealed and fed ghosts in her sword. Her god weapon, Ghost Sword, was a special sword with a total of 108 ghosts being sealed inside it. Every time she brandished her sword, the sword would emit a ghost cry. It was a standard ghost weapon corresponding to the style of the Ghost Sword Domain. The Ghost Sword Domain was a very special sword domain, an anomaly in the Sky Sword Gods Domain. It was said that living beings lived together with ghosts there. The boundary between life and death was very vague there. Very few people would come out of the Ghost Sword Domain, however, almost all of them were super geniuses. Yin Su was one of the strongest 4 people she had seen in the Sword Palace. She had a great chance of reaching the legend rank. The 2nd disciple, Rod, was from the Dragon God's Domain, a rare foreigner who had golden hair and blue eyes. He looked similar to Child Sign Yan, who had the bloodline of Western God's Domain, but his body was much taller and stronger. His god weapon was an outfit of sword and shield. His Morning Star sword could launch a strong attack, and his Steel Dragon shield could offer a strong defense, and his body was wearing a god weapon level alloy armor. But it was too much of a pity that he was facing Hua. None of his accoutrements survived her attack. Rod family was very famous in Dragon God's Domain, because a lot of strong heroes were born in his family. The reason why he came to the White Lotus Sword Palace was a mystery. As a descendant of a famous family in Dragon God's Domain, he decided to study abroad in this remote sword domain. When he had just entered the Sword Palace, his coming caused a wave of unrest here. His battle style was unpretentious but efficient, developing on his strong defense. He always parried the enemy's attack using his Steel Dragon shield and stroke back using his wind-like continuous slashes. If he joined an adventure team, he would undoubtedly stand at the front and protect all his teammates using his shield. Even so, he was the person who had the highest survival rate on the battlefield, because after judging, Yunshi thought that he couldn't break Rod's defense if he didn't put on the White Emperor mask. The last was the 1st disciple, Xia Ling. After observing her battle, Yunshi had to admit that she was stronger than him. Xia Ling was the princess of the Great Xia Sword domain, whose title was Dragon Soul Sword, because she had a pair of god weapons called Fiery Dragon Sword and Thunder Dragon Sword. She was the only person who made Hua Hua get serious. From the 9th to the 2nd, only Rod's shield was slightly harder. Only Xia Ling, the girl who had possessed the throne of number 1 for 3 years, made Hua Hua feel satisfied about her combat power. Her secret sword skill of turning her twin swords into 2 dragons really fed Yunxi's sight. Essentially, her sword skill was similar to Yunxi's Mist Soul army, and her strength was even stronger than Yunxi's since he had left the Water God's world. I understand, she was controlling the energy in this world in this manner. A new door opened to Yunxi after he saw her swords turned into dragons. Since the Mist Souls could turn into girls building wonders for me, they could naturally become other things. At any rate, the mist from Hydra's dream couldn't be inferior to her twin swords. I can do everything she did just now if I put on the White Emperor mask. She deserved to be the genius from the Great Xia Sword domain. If she hadn't met Hua Hua, no one would be able to push her down from the number 1 throne. At least, Yunxi knew her combat ability and combat experience were all stronger than his now. As for his childhood sweetheart, she was just an exception. So, from now on, I'm the strongest disciple in the White Lotus Sword domain. The White Lotus secret treasure. Did you see my battles? Hua Hua looked up at the sky tower. From the beginning, she didn't mind ranking amongst the disciples, but was pursuing the secret treasure. There were very few treasure in the entire Sky Sword God's domain could make her bloodline resonate, and the White Lotus secret treasure was one of them. No one knew what the secret treasure was. Probably only Yunhai the Sword Master really touched it before he became a Sky Sword. The projection of the secret treasure was a heritage he left for the Sword Palace. She didn't know what it was, but her sky-flying bloodline let her know that something special was here. Hydra wouldn't just find a random sword domain to sleep in. She must know something about this secret treasure. I want you. I have the identity and qualification to obtain you. If you are looking forward to such a result, respond to me. I believe you and Mai are both my treasures. Of course, your importance was slightly lower than him. She whispered in her heart. Oh, I said it. When I said I want to be the secret treasures master, I was actually saying Mai is my most important treasure. To the shy Hua Hua, it was like a straight confession in front of Yunxi. She was actually saying even the secret treasure isn't more important than you, my little she. Hua Hua, Yunxi was moved. If this is your wish, Hua Hua, if you really are such a valuable secret treasure, can you react to her? The great, mysterious, dreamlike White Lotus secret treasure, Dong. A strange echo suddenly came out of Yunxi's heart. Chapter 344, Awakening Ji. Yunxi thought that it was a delusion when he first heard the sound. Other people were still immersed in the incredible battles just now. They wondered how could this girl be so arbitrary. Dong. When the second echo came through his heart, he realized that it couldn't be a delusion. Something very huge, very old was resonating with his heart. Dong. When the third sound echoed, he couldn't help but look around nervously. He couldn't tell if it was good or bad, because it seemed that only he heard the sounds. The sounds were close, because his heart pounded heavily when resonating with the sounds. The sounds were distant, because they were the last traces of the wonder after such an overwhelming time had elapsed. Dong. When the fourth sound appeared, Hua Hua suddenly looked around and pressed her hand on her chest with a surprised look. In the sky above the White Lotus Sword Palace, a colorful light spread around and slowly shrank, leaving a circle of spiral burr-like light in the sky. The spiral burr was violet and red, looking like a door leading to another with. 2 small lights were floating under the spiral burr hand to hand. They were the future masters of this sword domain, White Lotus and Red Lotus. Apparently, they had also heard the sound, and they clearly knew what the sound meant. In fact, the twin witches were the guardians of the projection of the secret treasure. It was the biggest secret of the witches, which was inherited from generation to generation. They didn't know the reason, but they knew the sleeping, old secret treasure suddenly showed a part of its existence just now. No, it wasn't the existence of the projection, but the existence of the real White Lotus secret treasure. In the surprised eyes of the disciples, they couldn't stop their minds from linking this miracle with the announcement Hua just said. The patterns on the twin witches' clothes were suddenly activated, turning into an intangible chain locking the twin witches together. The twin witches were back to back and hand to hand, their eyes vacuously looked to the front as if they were being possessed by some old spirit. The time is coming. The witches of destiny, announce it. The Great One will revive in this era. Red Lotus opened her eyes and stretched out her hand to the void. The sorrow is softly swaying, and the memory is in an infinite loop. White Lotus opened her eyes and sang. The sleeping sorrow is going to wake up, turning into pale tears and sad groan. The chain linking the twin witches became a thread and spread out to the sky, intertwining together with the spiral burr. Your confusion. Your missing. Your memory. You soul. They are here. They are here. However, their faces suddenly turned to be indifferent. Only the phantom of the past is waiting for you. They can't say, they can't hear, they can't meet you, and they will be eternal. Only when you walk through the river of time, accomplishing the wish of the person who won't be forgiven, you can find the truth of everything. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust, only the soul will be immortal, but you won't recognize it. He is everywhere, Dawn. When the twin witches finished their prediction, suddenly, all people's hearts had a heavy pounding. A huge figure emerged out of the sky behind the twin witches, then one light after another appeared inside it and dropped to the ground, flying into everyone's body. They were the most pure lights being washed by the river of time. Everyone heard the sound after the lights flew into their bodies, and they realized that something suddenly appeared inside their souls. They found no words to describe how wonderful this wonder was. The stronger they were, the more value they could feel from the wonder. The White Lotus secret treasure. Hua was the first person who realized what this meant. It was the blessing from the White Lotus secret treasure. In legend, it was a rare treasure even to hero-ranked beings, not to mention to ordinary people. Originally, only the top 10 disciples could obtain this blessing after being recognized by the projection of the secret treasure, but now, everyone in the sword tip area just enjoyed this benefit. It was a blessing that could increase one's understanding about everything for 10 days. Originally, it was a core secret of the White Lotus Sword Palace. Hua's family knew this secret a long time ago, so they picked up and moved house to this remote sword domain from their original home in the Western Gods domain. Her bloodline was so perfect that she didn't need any object to enhance her physique. Only this secret treasure, which could increase her understanding, was the best to her. Apparently, the amount of the blessing was amazing, but they were just a small part of the real effect of the secret treasure. Probably it would only increase everyone's understanding for one day. For example, Hua felt that her mind suddenly became clear and efficient after hearing the sound. She suddenly understood the several sword skills that were troubling her. Even though it could only last for one day, which was just 1/10 of the effect of the projection, but it was producing an effect on all beings in this area. Not only humans, even dogs and cats got benefits from it. Some dogs' and cats' eyes suddenly became fresh and vivacious. It was the sign that their brains were developing wisdom. It was just a tiny part of the real power of the secret treasure. Perhaps only Yunhai the Sword Master knew the full effect of the real White Lotus secret treasure. Oh, you didn't disappoint me. You are mine, the White Lotus secret treasure. Feeling the refreshing ideas that were popping out of her mind, Hua looked at the disappearing spiral burr in high spirit. This day, many people, many beings' lives were changed. This day, many beings looked up at the sky, feeling the power of the legendary secret treasure with their own bodies. Well, there is really going to be trouble. Cassina whispered, as if she had witnessed the coming rainstorm caused by this emergency. Chapter 345. Talent Dawn. As if the string of the world was just being pulled, the huge figure slowly rotated in the sky, but no one could see it clearly through the spiral burr. Hua couldn't see it. The Starwing Knights girls couldn't see it. The tutors of the Sword Palace couldn't see it, and not even the master of the White Lotus Sword Domain, who had reached the 6th rank. Only 2 people vaguely saw a part of the secret treasure's true appearance. Oh, The White Lotus secret treasure looks like this. Cassina comfortably stretched out herself and had little interest in seizing it. She had found her way a long time ago. Only after defeating everything could she reach the summit of her battle god genre. The White Lotus secret treasure was actually useless to her, because she had reached the legend rank. Just like people couldn't step into the same river 2 times, she couldn't use it to reach the legend rank again. How can it be? Naturally, the other person who could see the secret treasure was Yunxi. However, the secret treasure didn't look like what he had guessed. Why does it look like this? Is it really something Hua wants? Dong, dong, dong. When the 13th sound disappeared, the spiral burr in the sky started to shrink. In the blink of an eye, the huge figure vanished in the air. Wait, why did I only hear 6 sounds? I still want to understand more. You heard 6 sounds. Why did I only hear 5 sounds? Me too, I heard 5 sounds. Is it the power of the secret treasure? I can feel that I can enter the hero rank within 3 months. The disciples talked with each other in high spirits. Just now, they enjoyed the weakened but free service of the blessing of the secret treasure. How couldn't they feel lucky? They just witnessed a legend and obtained a great benefit from it. Although none of them could see the real appearance of the secret treasure, it was already a great benefit for them to hear the sounds. However, after talking with each other, they found that different people heard a different number of the sounds. The more talented they were, the more sounds they could hear. The weakest disciples of the Sword Palace could be considered as a super genius in the towns they were born in. Even the weakest disciples heard the sounds 3 times. Quickly, they figured out the rule. The more times you heard the sounds, the greater your talent was. Even dogs and cats could hear 1 sound, and ordinary people could hear 2 sounds. The more sounds a person could hear, the higher achievement the person could obtain in the future. Wang Qi was the only top 10 disciple who said the number of the sounds he had heard in front of everyone. He heard 7 sounds, and this was the highest record all disciples had known. When he said it, everyone looked at him with envy. Apart from Wang Qi, the highest record was heard 6 sounds. Most disciples who heard 3 sounds were newbies who just arrived at the Sword Palace. The people who heard 4 sounds were the elite disciples of the Sword Palace. A lot of them were at the 3rd rank. Only the top 100 disciples heard 5 sounds, and the disciples at this level were all confident of entering the hero rank themselves. Hearing 6 sounds was a dividing line. The strongest person under the hero rank, Juzhen, just heard 6 sounds. He was likely to enter the hero rank 100%. The top 10 disciples all heard more than 7 sounds. On the whole, only the people who had reached the hero rank could hear 7 sounds. I heard only 7 sounds. The 4th disciple, Qin Su's hands were trembling. He could barely hold his sword in his hand. He didn't want to believe that he, the prince who had a great bloodline and god weapon, was at the same level with the 9th disciple, Wang Qi. Amongst all the top 10 disciples, only Wang Qi was careless and told everyone the number of the sounds he had heard without thinking. 7. Juzhen looked at the sky with a puzzled expression. He felt that something was wrong with the sounds he just heard, but couldn't figure it out immediately. Xia Ling, the princess of the Great Xia Sword domain, looked at the girl in the center of the ring, the monster who just awakened the secret treasure. How many sounds have you heard? She asked. Shuffle. Shuffle. Everyone looked at Hua intently. Yeah, as the monster who caused this, how many sounds had she heard? 10. Hua said straightly. She had decided to show herself in front of everyone, so she wouldn't lie. Even if she would fight against an entire world, she wouldn't change her mind. The White Lotus secret treasure is mine, so is my little Xi. I will obtain them both. Hiss. Everyone gasped after hearing her words. Most disciples only heard 4 or 5 sounds. The 9th disciple, Wang Qi, only heard 7 sounds. Although Xia Ling didn't say it, she probably only heard 8 sounds. She wasn't strong enough to crush Wang Qi instantly. Did the White Lotus secret treasure really appear for this freshman called Hua? Perhaps her talent was really so great that she could even awaken the legendary secret treasure. However, Yunxi looked around with confusion under the ring. Is there something wrong? Is there really a relationship between the sounds a person has heard with the person's talent? After all, I just heard 13 sounds. Chapter 346. Meet Elf again. Yes, there can't be any relationship. Yoon-shi estimated his own fighting capacity. When he was in his normal state and held the Crane Wing's twin swords, he was equal to half a hero rank. It was because his twin swords were a pair of spirit weapons and his mentality was at the hero rank. If he put on the White Emperor mask, he could summon the Mist Soul army. With the Mist Souls he could even dominate a war. If he was in the Water God's world, with the blessing from the entire world, he could temporarily suppress Hua for a few days. When he was outside of the Water God's world, his fighting capability would be still strong and he could still be in the top 3 list of the Sword Palace, but he knew he couldn't beat Xia Ling down, the princess from the Great Xia Sword Domain, and she was the second disciple now. In this case, how could he be match for Hua now? Hua could kill him 1,000,000 times instantly as long as he wasn't in the Water God's world. Her talent was probably the highest amongst all the people at the same age. So, I heard 13 sounds and she only heard 10, there must be something wrong. Probably the secret treasure was just dazed with sleep. However, he felt that he was familiar with the secret treasure, although he had never seen it before. He looked at the sky worriedly and couldn't make sense of it. Just now, he saw a half-bloomed flower in the sky behind the twin witches. Countless mysterious lines were on the petals of the flower. Why is the secret treasure a flower? I don't know about it, but I felt that I'm familiar with it. He couldn't figure out what this meant, so he had to hide his doubt deep inside his heart. Oh, so the White Lotus secret treasure is a very special flower. Probably even Yoon Hai didn't know the name of the flower. What a pity that I can't have a good fight with him. On the throne of the Sands of Time, Cassina raised her glass and said in a sad tone, spilling the wine on the floor. Farewell, to the Sky Sword who has gone. I really wanted to challenge you, to see how strong your Yoon Hai quadrant sword is. What a pity. Cheers. Quickly, everyone in the sword tip area knew the news that the true White Lotus secret treasure just appeared, and this news rapidly spread to the entire Sky Sword God's domain and even distant gods' domains via different channels. Even Yoon Hai the Sword Master didn't obtain the legendary secret treasure, but now, it suddenly appeared and it seemed that it was going to choose a master, which really shocked everyone. The entire White Lotus Sword domain hadn't quieted down yet due to the change of the stars, and now, it was going to have a new great disturbance. This remote sword domain became the main focus of everyone's eyes again. At this time, Yoon-shi hadn't known what was going to happen. Now, he was just Mai, who was walking on the street and looking at the shops with curiosity, thinking what foods he should make for the entire Starwing Knights troop. To celebrate Hua winning the throne of the #1 spot. Now they could finally enter the Sword Palace. Naturally they let their perfect maid Mai make a sumptuous dinner for them, which made him feel both funny and annoyed. Sigh, it seems that I have to pretend to be a maid in public. Fortunately, he had been used to making bread for Hua, so he didn't really feel rebellious about it. He just needed to feed dozens of more mouths than just Hua's one person. Just in time, he wanted to see the life in the sword tip area. Compared to the streets in the sword handle area, the people here were far stronger. He could see second ranks and third ranks everywhere, which was impossible to see in the mortal world. He even met several hero-ranked people, whose strength was strong enough to eliminate a small country. For example, there was a team in front of him, whose clothes style was very different than the clothes of this domain. The team was formed by a heavy armored shield knight, whose weapon looked more terrible than rods, a mage in black coat with a 3-colored crystal on his chest, and a real elf. She wasn't a dark elf like Black Moon but a traditional white elf. She had snow-white skin, sharp ears, a green bow and the vitality of nature. She was a forest elf, who was called the favorite of nature in the Western God's domain. He felt warm looking at the elf. Although she wasn't a dark elf, but, after all, she was an elf and an archer. "Hello, Miss Elf." Yoon-shi greeted her when passing by. He didn't expect to get any reply but just showed his kindness casually. "Sorry, I'm not a miss, I am a man, and I'm already 500 years old, so I should be much older than you." Well, that was really embarrassing. Looking at the 500-year-old male archer who looked very much like a young girl, She was speechless. If it was true, this elf was even older than his grandfather's grandfather's grandfather. The elf noticed his black-made uniform, his eyes became yearning and gentle. Hundreds of years was long enough to make humans forget everything, but to the long-lived elf race, it was just a short part of their lives. In his memory, he still remembered the country, the killing princess and the Great Maid's heritage, which had disappeared hundreds of years ago into history. It was a distant tale in the books of human beings, but to the elf, it was still like an experience from yesterday. The killing princess, the sword of blood. I didn't expect to see this heritage again in this remote sword domain, the elf archer said in the old, elegant Elven, showing his shocked feelings. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.